Hey guys! Tonight we slip through the creaking iron gate of a medieval convent, feeling the hush of centuries wrap around you like a dense woolen cloak. The thick stone walls seem to murmur with the echoes of chanting sisters, and the air tastes faintly of incense and damp earth. Somewhere, a lantern's flame flickers against the arched ceiling, casting shifting shadows that dance just beyond your vision. The story may solve mysteries you never had an explanation for. So, before you explore the story with me, please take a moment to help me subscribe to the channel, like and share this video, or maybe leave a comment below, but make sure you do it when you really like what I bring to you. And don't forget to let me know in the comments where and when you started watching. I love hearing about your late night rituals. Now, let's keep the lights as soft as possible. Turn on the fan for a gentle sound to help the story feel more emotional, and let's embark on tonight's journey together. You trudge forward along a narrow, flagstone path, gravel crunching beneath your sandals, and come to the heavy oak doors of the convent's entrance. A novice sister in a simple grey habit greets you with a curt nod, her eyes solemn but curious. You clutch the edge of your own rough-spun tunic, recalling that admission into a medieval nunnery was far from casual. Entry often required a dowry or patronage from a wealthy family, and for some, joining the convent was the only safe option in a world plagued by war and disease. Historians still argue whether these convents function primarily as spiritual refuges or social safety nets for unmarried women. But one thing is certain, the threshold you cross now is more than a door, it's a boundary between two worlds. Inside, the air grows cooler and quieter, save for distant echoes of discouraged whispers. You learn that perpetual silence was not just piety, but a strict rule enforced by medieval superiors. Speaking without permission could mean a beating with a small wooden tablet called a board of silence, a quirky tool so awkward it sometimes left sisters with bruised egos rather than bones. And yet, that strange board served its purpose, warning novices that their words carried weight even in the hush. As the entry ritual begins, you kneel before the abbess, her silver-threaded veil gleaming in the candlelight. She asks if you consent to sever all ties with your former life, trading your family's lingering warmth for stone cell walls. A single tear collects at the corner of your eye. But you hold it back. You've travelled far, and there's no turning back. You utter your vow of obedience, chastity, and poverty in a voice that trembles so quietly you hope only the angels hear. This bit of ceremony echoes across Christendom. By the 12th century, over 1,500 female monastic houses dotted Europe's landscape, a mainstream historical fact that underscores just how widespread these communities were. Once you vow, a novice sister performs the ritual tonsure, shearing your hair into a bare circle atop your head. The cool breeze against your scalp makes you shiver. Tonsure symbolised renouncing vanity, yet the sensation of exposed skin beneath the woolen veil is oddly liberating, like shaving your head for a summer buzz cut, minus the Instagram post. The abbess drapes your new veil over your head, and you feel its weight settle on your shoulders, marking the start of your new identity. Throughout this initiation, you catch fleeting glimpses of quirks that set nunneries apart from the outside world. For instance, novices sometimes carried small wooden staves that bore their family crests, hidden beneath the habit, an odd concession to personal history, as if the convent still tolerated a secret handshake with your past. Do you remember how you once hid your phone under your pillow to sneak extra screen time? Well, in a way, these crests were medieval TikToks, silent badges hinting at the life you left behind. With the ritual complete, the abbess invites you into the cloister garden, a secret courtyard framed by stone arches and brimming with medicinal herbs. You inhale the sharp scent of rosemary and lavender, so different from the smoky tang of the chapel. Here, novices gather to learn horticulture skills, growing herbs not only for cooking but for healing. It's said that some convents brewed over 200 tinctures and salves, blending faith with fringe medicine that historians still debate for its actual efficacy. You run your fingers over a row of healing comfrey, imagining its poultice on a knight's battle wounds. As twilight deepens, you settle into one of the long wooden benches lining the garden's edge. A gentle breeze stirs the petals of a nearby rosebush, the same variety cultivated in France since the 11th century for symbolic use in Marian iconography. You press your palm against the cool stone wall and wonder at the life you've just embraced, a world of discipline, devotion, and hidden oddities, stitched together by the silent rhythm of prayer. A distant bell tolls, calling you toward the chapel. You stand, brushing a stray thread from your habit, and step into the growing shadows. Ahead, the heavy doors of solemn vows swing open once more, and you trudge onward, heart racing, into the unfolding mysteries of convent life. You follow the echo of the chapel bell, every footstep muffled by the thick stone floors, and cross the threshold into an expanse of stillness so profound it feels alive. The vaulted ceiling looms overhead like a silent witness, its cold limestone surfaces draped in shadows. A single ray of moonlight filters through a narrow, clerestory window, illuminating motes of dust that drift like memories of whispered prayers. You inhale, and the air tastes faintly of aged wood and melting wax. Here, language itself is a relic. From the moment you uttered your vows, you pledged to observe the rule of holy silence, a mainstream historical fact upheld by the Benedictine order since the 6th century. To speak freely meant risking the silent rod, a lopsided staff carved with tiny angels whose hollow eyes rattled when shaken, warning you that your words would be judged. Scholars still argue whether these silent implements fostered spiritual focus or merely reinforced oppressive control over women's voices. But to you, the rod's soft clatter is a constant reminder. Every word must be earned. Your own voice feels strange in your throat. At first, you mouth prayers silently, lips moving like a pantomime in a 1,000-people audience. Novices learn quickly to trace psalm verses on their vellum notebooks, for the rule extends to ordinary conversation. No greetings, no gossip, no laughter, unless granted a word of kindness by the abbess herself. You find yourself craving speech so much that you almost greet a snail passing by on the cold stone floor. Tip: snails make terrible conversationalists. As you settle on a narrow bench beneath a fresco of Saints Cecilia and Catherine, you press your fingertips against the cool wood, trying to steady your racing heartbeat. The silence here is almost tactile, like a blanket weighing on your shoulders, ironically heavier than the habit draping your frame. You recall your last dinner with friends, the clamour of forks on plates, the spontaneous laughter at a silly TikTok trend. Now, you'd give anything for a banter over burnt toast. Instead, you lean forward and follow the arching tracery of the vaulted ceiling, counting each stone ring like beads on a rosary. A fellow novice glides past, her lips moving in silent prayer. You offer a slight nod, which in convent etiquette can mean everything from greetings to apologies. You learn to perfect its nuance. Do you remember how a thumbs-up emoji once meant approval? Here, a tilted head or the gentlest brow raise can weigh more than any hashtag. You practice the subtle art of non-verbal conversation, mastering a tiny shrug that conveys "I forgot the vigil bell," and a soft smile that signals "thank you" when water is passed at the refectory. By candlelight in the scriptorium, you copy an illuminated manuscript, quill scratching across parchment, but even your humming voice is forbidden, so you mimic tunes silently, shaping melodies on your tongue without sound. You sometimes flip a page too hard, and the sharp crack echoes across the silent chamber, prompting everyone to look up in shock, as if you committed a cardinal sin. Historians still argue whether strict silence improved the quality of monastic manuscripts or slowed productivity due to constant tension, but your cramped hand and throbbing wrist suggest the balance was precarious. Nighttime ushers in the matins, a prayer hour spoken in whispers. Yes, Even prayer is hushed, and you stand for hours, knees creaking in protest. The only noise the rustle of deeds being turned. The rhythm of whispered psalms builds into a symphony of sighs, collective breath that fill the chapel with a living silence. You close your eyes, and it feels like you're swimming in still water, every ripple of thought amplified by the absence of noise. A stray draft brushes past your ear, carrying a distant clink of metal, perhaps the cook dropping a spoon in the kitchen below. In this world, even the smallest sound feels dramatic, like a cymbal crash in a solo performance. At mealtime in the refectory, you bow your head before lifting the wooden trencher to your lips. Clinking spoons are forbidden, so you sip broth from the edge, careful not to slurp. The practice seems absurdly civilized. Imagine sipping coffee on a Zoom call without ever hearing a slurp or a mmm, and yet it underscores the point. Silence cultivates mindfulness. Or perhaps it cultivates paranoia, as you glance sideways to see if anyone caught your soup moustache. Once, in a moment of weakness, you mouthed a joke about the abbess's hairnet. It's so tight, she could hang a tapestry from it, and nearly laughed out loud. The twitch at the corner of your mouth was so conspicuous that the sister beside you raised an eyebrow. You froze, praying the abbess wasn't nearby, and cursed the silent rod you never actually saw but firmly believed in. It's said that sisters sometimes hid small bells in their habits, quirky little contraband trinkets meant to test the rules, tipping them ever so softly to hear just the faintest chime. You suspect those bells did more to comfort troubled novices than to punish them. Midday brings a brief single-word allotment. The abbess chooses one word each sister may speak, often related to charity or humility. Yesterday's word was forgive, which you practiced endlessly, first whispering it to yourself, then mouthing it to the cook, and finally, when your moment came, summoning enough courage to voice it aloud. Your sister's encouraging nods felt warmer than any chorus of congratulations. Yet you wonder, was this tiny allowance an act of kindness or just another reminder of how tightly your tongue is tethered? Outside the cloister walls, life carries on in a blur of livestock, cartwheels and market calls. You hear muffled laughter and the sharp bark of a vendor selling fish, sounds that stir in your chest like a child awakened too soon. By comparison, the convent's silence is a physical barrier, both shielding and isolating. Some scholars still debate whether these walls created spiritual sanctuaries or simply imprisoned voices, but for you, the days blur into a canvas of white-robed shapes and whispered breaths. As dusk falls, you return to the chapel for compline, the final prayer before sleep. You kneel on the cold stone, fingers brushing the smooth edge of the prayer bench. The echo of a single whispered Amen feels like a secret shared between you and every sister present. Your thoughts drift to home. Do you still remember your mother's voice? The comforting drone of your father reading bedtime stories? You close your eyes, and in the hush, you almost believe you can hear those distant memories, carried on the breath of your own quiet prayer. At night, in your cell, you lie on a simple straw mattress with only a rough blanket for comfort. The thick walls block most sounds, but sometimes, when the wind howls, it rattles the latticed window and reminds you that the world beyond is alive and roaring. You trace the outline of the window's tiny cross, the only view you have of the sky. In the darkness, silence becomes a lullaby, soft, enveloping, occasionally unsettling. You roll onto your side, pulling the blanket up to your chin. Your lips itch to form words you no longer have the freedom to speak. But as sleep steals your thoughts, the silence breathes with you, a gentle, unbroken rhythm. You surrender to it, trusting that tomorrow, when the bell tolls again, you'll rise to honour the vow you made, a vow born in echoes, carried in stillness, and kept alive by the profound power of unspoken faith. You rise before dawn's first pale glow seeps through the narrow slit of your cell window, your limbs stiff from the rough straw beneath you. The air tastes of lingering candle wax and the faint musk of wool. As you stand, a novice sister hands you a folded bundle, your new habit. It feels as heavy as a soldier's cloak, but there's no battlefield here, only a life of prayer, duty, and the constant awareness of every fibre pressing against your skin. You shrug off your simple tunic and step into the coarse woolen tunicle, its rough texture scratching at your bare arms. This tunicle, paired with a scapula, a broad strip of cloth draped over your shoulders and tied at the waist, has clothed medieval nuns since the 4th century, a fact whispered during many a midday meal. By the high Middle Ages, every nun in Western Europe wore this distinctive garb as a public symbol of renunciation and humility. Historians still argue whether the weight of the habit reinforced spiritual discipline or merely made daily life unnecessarily burdensome. But you soon find its presence impossible to ignore. The habit's weight pulls at your shoulders from the moment you don it. You flex your arms, trying to lift an imaginary dumbbell, only to wince as the wool settles like a mountain on your back. It's said that some especially strict houses layered habits for colder climates. Imagine wearing 3 winter coats at once while trying to pet a cat without looking like an accidental sumo wrestler. Even the toughest sisters would wince at such a sight. The nun's daily routine becomes a choreography dictated by the habit. To bow in prayer, you must bend at the waist and press your palms together, feeling the thick fabric tighten across your back. When you kneel, the weight pulls you forward, urging you to rise with more effort. Carrying a bucket of water from the fountain to the kitchen requires careful balance, or you risk spilling precious liquid onto the stone floor, a mishap that once provoked a stern rebuke from the cellarer for wasting God's gift, as if baptism had equipped you with water wings. As you step into the cloister garden, the gentle clack of wooden clogs reverberates through the archways, each footfall muffled by the habit's fall. The wool traps the garden's damp chill, and you can almost taste the dew on the mint and thyme leaves brushing against your ankle. You raise one hand to brace against a cold pillar, aware of how the fabric catches on rough stone, threatening to shred the precious cloth. Ironically, the very material meant to signify humility also demands constant vigilance, a quirky predicament that reminds you of modern skinny jeans, designed to look simple, yet impossible to move in. In the choir stalls, you settle into a high-backed bench and adjust the ample folds of your mantle. The choir's morning psalms begin, and you sway slightly, each sway a negotiation between devotion and the mantle's pendulous bulk. You try to mirror the chorus's movements with your eyes rather than your entire form, lest the habit's weight shift too dramatically and crush your neighbour's elbow. A novice beside you lets out a silent sigh so forceful that her scapula flaps against her legs like a startled pigeon's wings. You stifle a smile, recalling that silence violation was one of the few times the board of silence came down, not on flesh, but on faint-hearted humour. As mid-morning chores approach, you descend stone steps to the laundry room, the weight of habit tugging you backward, like trying to climb stairs with a sleeping cat draped across your shoulders. You gather a bundle of linens, but the scapular straps cut into your shoulders, reminding you that humility can be as sharp as a thorn. It's a mainstream fact that nunneries often ran their own laundries, processing garments not only for the sisters, but for surrounding villagers, generating modest income for the convent. Some scholars still debate whether these industries empowered medieval women economically, or merely kept them tethered to endless drudgery. But from where you stand, the sudsy water and stiff, soaking habit feel like penance in liquid form. A slight breeze slips through a nearby window, lifting the hem of your tunicle and revealing the fine cording of your rope girdle. The girdle encircles your waist, knotted with 3 loops to represent your vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience, a symbolic yoke that tightens if you dare to stray. You adjust the rope, but the knots bite into your skin. It's curious to think that this simple cord carries more symbolism than many nobles' jewelled belts, yet pinching you with all the fervour of divine reminder. Do you remember trying to wear a tight belt on a long car ride? This is that, times 10, with prayer thrown in. No habit is complete without the veil, 2 pieces of linen framing your face and draping down your back. The wimple, wrapped around your chin and neck, presses against your jaw, suffocating your cheek. When you speak, even a single word during the rare word of kindness, the linen shifts, threatening to reveal a hint of your mouth, a forbidden act. The abbess once caught a sister tugging at her wimple to scratch an itch and scolded her for seeking comfort before communion. You blush at the memory, mindful that every tug or shift in the habit risks drawing attention to your body, the very thing you vowed to conceal. During the midday meal in the refectory, you try to adjust the folds of the scapula so that you can reach for broth without slopping it onto your habit sleeve. Your neighbours admire your dexterity as you expertly bend to sip, but inside, you panic at the thought of brewing a soup-stain mural on centuries of tradition. You recall that medieval pigment theory held that saffron yellow stains repelled evil spirits, perhaps accidental warding from kitchen mishaps. Quirky as it sounds, some sisters believed their cooking accidents had mystical benefits, though historians still argue whether such beliefs had genuine theological roots or emerged as comforting folklore. As afternoon work begins, copying manuscripts, gardening, or teaching novices, the habit moulds itself to your shape. You feel your posture unconsciously aligning with the cloth's weight, a gentle reminder to stand straight, pray erect, yet at every turning pivot you must allow extra space, lest the folds catch on table corners or a fellow sister's rosary beads. It's akin to navigating a crowded subway while wearing a backpack 3 sizes too big. But here, crowded subways are replaced by silent corridors and sacred texts. By Vespers, you've adjusted to the habit's presence, though it never quits its quiet dialogue with your body. You lower yourself into the choir stalls, the walls settle in around you like a warm hug, or a hug that's a bit too tight in all the wrong places. As you sing the final hymn, a gentle melody so hushed you feel as though you're humming inside a seashell, you realise the habit has become part of your identity. The weight you once resented now grounds you, a physical echo of your spiritual commitment. When darkness falls and you return to your cell, you peel off the layers one by one, each removal as relieving as shedding baggage, both literal and metaphorical. You fold the habit neatly on a wooden stool, fingers grazing the rough fabric as if saying goodbye. The weight is gone, but its imprint remains in your shoulders, a silent testament to the day's devotion. You lie down, the cell feeling unusually light, and drift towards sleep, your dreams woven with threads of wool and woven vows. You rise again before dawn's pale glow, kneeling on the cold stone floor as the chapel's iron-bound doors creak open. A thin sliver of torchlight cuts through the darkness, guiding you to your stall in the choir. The air is heavy with the scent of melting wax and worn oak benches, each breath a reminder that the day's first duty awaits, the prayer marathon known as the Divine Office. You steady your breath and join the sisters in chanting matins, the longest prayer hour of the day, often lasting up to 2 hours by the 13th century, a mainstream historical fact underscoring the rigour of medieval devotion. Your voice, thin from disuse, joins a chorus of voices rising in whispered unison. Each psalm verse echoes off the vaulted ceiling, sounding both ancient and strangely intimate. You feel the vibration in your chest, as though your very bones are reciting the words. Historians still argue whether the Divine Office truly deepened spiritual connection or simply served as a mechanism of strict discipline. But for you, every syllable feels like a step deeper into wonder, and sometimes into delirium. After the first hour, your knees begin to protest, creaking like an old door hinge. You shift your weight, trying not to squeak, and silently pray for stronger joints, or at least a chiropractor. At Lord's, the second office just before sunrise, you stand in a semicircle around the high altar. The flicker of candles dances on the gilded tabernacle, and you inhale the warm glow. Your heart thrums in time with the chant's rhythmic pulse. A fellow novice accidentally drops her breviary, and the thump reverberates through the chapel like a drumbeat, startling everyone into an involuntary collective pause. You suppress a giggle, recalling your grandmother's antique vase shattering in her parlour once. Even breakable things deserve dramatic flair. By prime, the third office at first light, your voice has warmed like a kettle on the fire. The sisters' harmonies seem to ebb and flow, and you follow their lead, letting the ancient words roll off your tongue with a comforting familiarity. You imagine the chants as waves lapping against a shore of stone, each crest a liturgical affirmation. Do you remember how you once tried singing in the shower and discovered shampoo makes terrible costume drama hair? Here, your hair is hidden beneath layers of linen, but your voice feels liberated. Terse, sexed, and none follow at mid-morning intervals, slicing the day into 6 sacred checkpoints. Each office lasts 30 to 45 minutes, yet the total prayer marathon can stretch past 6 hours, an endurance feat rivaling any modern Ultraman contest. You stifle a yawn, noting that medieval nurses called silence the mother of prayer. Yet your mind anchors on the word ultra-marathon and wonders if it would have fit on a medieval scroll. Between prayer hours, you steal brief moments of rest in the cloister garden, where the scent of rosemary and crushed mint offers a fragrant counterpoint to the chapel's incense. You cradle a ceramic mug of weak barley water, chilling your throat after hours of singing. Some convents brewed up to 50 varieties of herbal teas, quirky evidence that nuns were unwitting pioneers of holistic health, though historians still debate how much these brews actually cured versus comforted. The bell tolls for Vespers, the evening prayer. You return to the chapel, its interior now bathed in the orange glow of sunset. Your throat feels scratchy, like you'd spent the afternoon narrating your own awkward high school play. Yet, when the sisters sing the Magnificat, their voices blend into a shimmering tapestry, and you find yourself swept along, forgetting the ache in your limbs. The hymn's conclusion arrives like a lullaby, and you almost expect to see stars twinkling against the stone vault. Compline, the final office before sleep, arrives with a hush. You settle into the choir stall, the flicker of torches softening into a gentle glow. With each whispered Amen, your mind unravels the day's tension. The rule required 6 psalms, 3 lessons, and several responsories, tallying more than 100 recited lines before you even lay your head on straw. It's said that some sisters marked their progress by carving tiny tally marks on the wooden bench ends, a quirky practice that left medieval archaeologists scratching their heads centuries later. In the thick silence after Compline, as you glide back to your cell, you feel the cumulative weight of every prayer hour. Your knees throb like distant church bells, and your voice hums with the echo of psalms still lingering in your throat. Yet there's a luminous clarity in your mind, a tranquil wakefulness that no amount of coffee could replicate. Do you recall pulling an all-nighter to binge-watch your favourite series? This feels similar, except you're feasting on ancient words rather than streaming pixels, and the only cliffhanger is whether your voice will survive until tomorrow. Back in your cell, you note the time by the moon's gentle arc across the narrow window. Your body aches in places you didn't know could ache, every sinew reminding you of the day's spiritual odyssey. As you remove your prayer book from the shelf, the cover's worn leather feels as familiar as an old friend. Hints of lavender and beeswax linger from hundreds of recitations, and you trace the embossed cross with reverent fingers. Lying down on your straw pallet, you run through tomorrow's offices in your mind, anticipating the silent thrill of rising before dawn. You whisper a final aspiration, that your voice, though fragile and weary, will rise once more to carry ancient words across the stillness. Then you close your eyes, letting the echoes of psalms fade into a gentle heartbeat, your body and spirit poised for another day in the ceaseless prayer marathon. You awaken in your cell with a rumble in your belly that feels as persistent as a church bell's toll. The faint light of dawn slips through the latticed window, casting a pale glow on your straw pallet. As you rise, you recall that medieval nuns subsisted on an austere diet, typically just 2 meals a day, with no meat and limited fish, all governed by complex fasting regulations laid down by church councils since the early Middle Ages. Historians still argue whether these rules were driven by genuine spiritual discipline or by the church's desire to conserve resources, and your empty stomach is now the battleground of that debate. You dress quickly, pulling on your tunicle and scapula, and follow the corridor's dim torchlight to the refectory. The air is cool and tinged with the faint aroma of stale barley and spoiled milk. In the refectory's long oak hall, you see dozens of sisters seated on benches, heads bowed in silent grace before the single trencher placed before each of you. Today is Ember Wednesday, one of the 4 quarterly fast days when even fish is forbidden, replaced by a thin gruel called posset, made from watered-down almond milk and a pinch of saffron, an odd luxury reserved only for flavour's sake. A mainstream fact: by the 13th century, the rule of St. Benedict specified 65 fasting days each year, more than the days you normally ate, and you quickly calculate how many more mornings of gruel lie ahead. You kneel at your station, and the cellarer, a stout nun with a grim smile, ladles the lukewarm posset into your trencher. The gruel's texture is reminiscent of watered oatmeal, but you note a curious sweet note from the saffron, the same spice once worth more than gold by weight. You inhale its scent, warm, slightly bitter, and take a small sip. Your tongue recoils at the meatless broth, as if you've tasted penance itself. You wonder if this saffron was smuggled in by zealous sisters who believed even austerity deserves a dash of colour. Some convent records mention secret saffron caches hidden in straw pallets, quirky tidbits that suggest nuns sometimes bent their own rules. As you eat, the abbess reads aloud from Deuteronomy, reinforcing that fasting cleanses the soul. The echo of her voice fills the hall, and you swallow each mouthful with ritual solemnity. You notice that some novices try to mask their hunger by closing their eyes, but your stomach churns audibly, betraying your devotion. A sister beside you discreetly presses a thumb to her lips, an informal gesture meaning steady yourself, and you nod, grateful for the silent solidarity. After the gruel comes a short break until the second meal at terce. You retreat to the cloister garden, inhaling the damp earth and listening to the distant clatter of sheep in the yard. You cup your hands and sip water from a carved stone fountain. The water tastes faintly of moss and clay, a subtle reminder of the convent's rural isolation. Do you remember chugging iced lattes during finals week? This water is no iced latte, but you savour its pure simplicity. When the bell tolls for terce, you return to the refectory for your second and final meal of the day. Today the fare is slightly heartier: coarse rye bread, leeks, and a small bowl of bean pottage. You break off a piece of bread with your calloused hands and dip it into the pottage. The vegetables are soft and almost sweet. The beans are filling, starchy comfort. Yet every bite carries the undercurrent of restriction. No cheese, no butter, no honey. You recall reading that some convents kept secret stores of butter hidden behind false panels in the pantry, a fringe practice that suggests even the most devout nuns craved occasional richness. Historians still debate whether such smuggling was widespread or mere legend, but the thought of clandestine butter raids brings a shy smile to your lips. Between meals, the hunger gnaws at you like a persistent mouse, but you channel your discomfort into prayer and work. You scrub the stables, the chill of morning mist seeping through your habit, and the scent of livestock mingles with the wool's musty warmth. Each scoop of straw you pitch adds a slight weight to your scarf, mirroring the heaviness in your gut. A passing brother monk glances at you with a raised brow, perhaps in sympathy, perhaps in silent judgment, and you nod politely, acknowledging a shared monastic austerity across gendered walls. By sext, you find solace in the scriptorium, where dim candlelight illuminates your parchment. As you trace red and blue filigree in a sacred text, your stomach rumbles so loudly that you almost glance around to ensure no one heard. The candle's tiny flame flickers, casting dancing shadows across your vellum. You dip your quill in ink and continue copying the Lord's Prayer, each stroke a meditation on sustenance, both physical and spiritual. You think of Psalm 42's lament, "My soul thirsts for God, for the living God." In this moment, the verse resonates on two levels: divine yearning and your very earthly thirst. Mid-afternoon arrives, and the cell door creaks open just long enough for the infirmarian to slide in a clay bowl of barley water and a few warm croutons if you're lucky. The infirmarian moves silently, her patchwork robe whispering across the floor. She offers you the bowl without meeting your eyes. You take a tentative sip, feeling the liquid's smooth warmth. It caresses your throat, unexpectedly comforting, and you think that maybe, for the infirm and elderly sisters, these small allowances were more than mercy, they were lifelines. Quirky though it seems, some convents designated special mercy bowls for suffering sisters, decorated with simple crosses to distinguish them. Scholars still argue whether these mercy bowls represented true compassion or a grudging concession to human frailty. As evening approaches, you struggle to maintain focus during Vespers. Your stomach cramps like a wind-up toy unwound too far. Yet when the final hymns conclude, you steal a moment in the cellar, where the dusty granary stands. You place your ear against the cool wooden door and listen for the rumble of grain within. One day, you resolve, you'll sneak a handful of oats, just enough to silence the relentless hunger. But for now, duty calls you back. At Compline, you stand with bowed head, repeating the litany of psalms. Hunger and devotion intertwine until you're no longer sure where one ends and the other begins. You leave the chapel with hollow steps, your body a testament to the day's strict regimen. Back in your cell, you trace the outline of the cross carved into the wall by a long-forgotten sister, feeling its rough edges against your fingertips. As you lie down, stomach still churning, you whisper a prayer not for cleansing of your soul, but for one crust of bread in tomorrow's meal. You close your eyes, and hunger becomes a distant echo, lulling you into a restless sleep. The promise of dawn, and the possibility of breaking your fast, awaits you in the silent pre-dawn hours. You awaken to the low hum of dawn as the convent's main gate rattles, signalling the day's first chores. It's a crisp morning, and the damp chill clings to your habit as you join a small group of sisters gathering wooden buckets. Today's assignment: cleaning the infirmary floors, the stone hall where frail sisters rest, their coughs echoing off the walls. Scrub brushes in hand, you kneel before the first stretch of flagstones. Water sloshes at your knees, dripping down to mingle with the scrubbed dirt and spilled ointments from the night's ministrations. Since the early Middle Ages, labour has been considered both penance and service. The rule of St. Benedict mandates manual work to prevent idleness, a mainstream historical fact still echoed in modern monastic life. As you grip the coarse broom, you recall that some orders specialised chores among sisters. One tended the bakery while another mended robes. Historians still argue whether this division of labour empowered medieval nuns economically or merely entrenched a rigid hierarchy. To you, however, the chore list feels less about economics and more about survival. It takes unwavering focus to scrub away dried herbal salve and blood-stained bandages. Your back arches as you push the brush forward, grit scraping against stone and wool alike. The friction sends tiny vibrations up your arms, a kinesthetic reminder of every promise you've made. Nearby, Sister Agatha hums, not audibly, but her lips move in a silent cadence, tracing a hymn. You watch and mimic her movements, humming in your head to maintain your rhythm. A whispered joke surfaces. Who knew mint-scented cleaning water could double as body wash? Yet you swallow the thought, knowing that jokes must remain unspoken gems, sparking laughter only in your mind. Mid-morning, you transition to garden duties under a leaden sky. You trudge through the soft earth, tending rows of medicinal herbs, marjoram, yarrow, and St. John's wort, each known in monastery gardens since at least the 12th century for their healing properties. Some sly sisters would pinch a leaf or two to chew on when tasks grew tedious. A fringe practice whispered among novices as both comfort and transgression. You pinch a stem of marjoram and inhale its antiseptic aroma, recalling youthful curiosity, like stealing gum in class. But this gum could soothe a fever blister. While pruning tangled sage bushes, you notice a knot of ivy creeping over the cloister wall. Legend holds that ivy wards off evil spirits. Some sisters braided it into wreaths above doorways, quirky superstitions that historians still debate for their origins. You gently tug at rogue vines, mindful of preserving the plant, and think about how subtle acts of care ripple outward. One misplaced vine might crack mortar, but proper pruning keeps both wall and spirit strong. Back in the laundry chamber by noon, you haul a large bundle of linens to the wash basin. The water's chill makes your fingers numb as you plunge the heavy fabrics into the tub. You scrub a stubborn stain, a burgundy blotch from a spillberry pie gifted by a grateful noble. The stain resists like sin resisting confession. Using a rough soapstone, you grit away until the cloth bleaches pale, each stroke a confession of your inner impatience. Some convents even employed local villagers to help with laundry, an early form of outsourced labour, though such arrangements sparked debate over whether monastic communities were isolating sanctuaries or economic powerhouses. In mid-afternoon, word spreads that a sister in the infirmary needs assistance. You hurry across the courtyard, brushing damp hair from your face. Sister Helen lies on her pallet, fevered and delirious. The infirmarian instructs you to prepare a poultice of willow bark and honey. Willow bark's pain-relieving reputation dates back to antiquity and remains mainstream historical knowledge, yet medieval mixtures often included mandrake root, a fringe addition rumoured to induce prophetic dreams. You grind bark in a mortar, adding just enough honey to bind the paste, and gently apply it to Helen's temple. She flinches at the cool mixture, then sighs, drifting between consciousness and restful stupor. As you wipe the residual paste from your hands, the infirmarian thanks you with her rare-spoken words, an honour reflecting both trust and your growing proficiency. You bow your head, noting how small gestures can feel monumental in this silent world. The infirmarian's deep-eyed gaze lingers, as if she values your empathy more than your efficiency. Evening chores bring you back to the bakery, where you help knead dough for the next day's bread. The yeasty aroma warms your senses, a sharp contrast to floral herb scents and antiseptic basins. Tradition holds that convents baked bread not only for sustenance but also for sale to pilgrims, a mainstream fact that illustrates nuns' dual roles as spiritual providers and economic actors. You shape dough with practiced hands, marvelling at how soft, pliable wheat can become nourishment. A mischievous thought crosses your mind. Who needs a spa day when you've got dough therapy? Yet the corners of your lips remain still beneath the wimple. At dusk, the communal bell summons you for one final task, lighting the lamps along the cloister walkway. You dip feather wicks into oil-filled brass lamps, careful not to drip as you walk. The flickering lights cast elongated shadows that stretch across the garden's stone path, a quiet procession like stars rising at eventide. Do you remember chasing fireflies as a child? These lamps are less playful but more purposeful, guiding sisters through darkness both literal and spiritual. Finally, With the lamps lit and chores complete, you return to your cell, body fatigued yet fulfilled. You kneel beside your pallet to recite your private prayers, the day's physical labour still humming in your muscles. The convent silence, once daunting, now feels like a companion. Every scrub brush stroke, every pruned ivy vine, every poultice applied has woven you deeper into this community of ritual and service. Lying down on the straw mattress, you feel the aches in your shoulders and knees settle into a satisfying ache, proof of a day spent in devoted toil. You trace the faint outline of your habit's hem on the floorboards, letting its memory anchor you. As sleep beckons, you whisper a quiet thanks for this chance to serve, body and soul entwined in the sacred choreographed dance of convent life. You awaken to the faint glow of dawn spilling through your cell window, your fingertips brushing the rough-hewn wood of the simple stool that holds all of your worldly goods. A small carved crucifix hangs above your pallet, its austere form reminding you that personal possessions here are not merely discouraged, they're practically forbidden. You swing your legs over the edge of the straw mattress, listening to the soft rustle of your habit as you rise. Outside, the morning bell tolls, a call to relinquish every last trace of your former life. In the corridor, you clutch your tunicle and slip into the habit, aware that you own nothing beyond the few garments on your back and the single wooden rosary at your waist. Historians still argue whether vows of poverty truly liberated medieval nuns from material burdens, or simply subjected them to unnecessary hardship. But you feel the tension in your chest as you remember the velvet pouch of coins you once carried. That pouch, heavy with silver deniers, represented choice and freedom, luxuries you traded for obedience and communal anonymity. You walk to the chapel with measured steps, counting each flagstone beneath your clogs. Before you enter, you pause at the letterbox, a small grate in the wall where messages from patrons or relatives might be slipped through. Peering inside, you expect to see parchments loaded with news of dowries or distant harvests. Instead, the box stands empty, a hollow reminder that nunneries demanded severance not only of speech but of material comfort. A mainstream fact, many medieval convents required novices to renounce all inheritance rights, effectively disinheriting them from familial wealth in perpetuity. As you kneel in the aisle, the cold stone pressing into your knees, you think of the only token you possess, a plain iron ring given to you by the abbess at your profession ceremony. Its dark metal is unadorned and unforgiving, yet you twist it between thumb and forefinger, finding strange security in its weight. Quirky as it seems, some sisters polish these rings each evening, believing the gleam reflected divine light. Others let them tarnish until they melded into the skin. Scholars still debate whether the ring represented genuine spiritual symbolism or served as a subtle tool of institutional control. After matins, you head to the parlour for the day's limited allowance of speech, one conversation permitted with a visitor or internunnery delegate. Today, a town record keeper arrives to discuss the convent's annual grain tithes. You stand, heart fluttering, as you're handed a single stick of charcoal and instructed to inscribe tallies on a slate, your only writing tool apart from communal quills and ink. Each mark is a token of exchange. Instead of coins, you trade numbers. As you etch the final tally, you feel a pang for the smooth quill you once used to pen letters home, the feel of flowing ink beneath your fingers. Yet you know that letting go of these implements, once coveted for their beauty, was part of the journey. Returning to the cloister garden, you tend the basil and rosemary with bare hands, careful not to disturb the loam more than necessary. A lone dandelion pushes through a crack in the paving stone. You tug it free, mindful that even this weed represented a claim to property. It strikes you as absurd. In the secular world, people treasure flowers, but here, a single dandelion is an act of possession. You brush the dirt from your fingertips, feeling strangely bereft as you cast the offending sprig aside. At mid-morning, you assist in the refectory, carrying a communal bowl of barley porridge. The heavy wooden spoon you cradle is one of the few implements not considered personal, but even it feels like an alien object in your hands. The rule of St. Benedict prescribed utensils be shared, washed in public, and stored without personal markings, a mainstream rule echoed across Europe's monasteries. You pass the bowl from sister to sister, mindful that it must be returned empty, unblemished, and unclaimed. By sext, you slip into the scriptorium for a stint copying a missal. The desk before you is stacked with centuries of communal books, their spines worn and pages dog-eared. You open a volume of illuminated psalms, savouring the intricate gold leaf and cobalt blue pigments, then close your eyes and remind yourself these are not your treasures. The quill you hold feels fragile, its feather delicate as a bird's wing. You trace letters with careful precision, aware that each stroke of ink is a deposit into the convent's collective heritage, not your personal legacy. You watch a senior sister handle a solitary reliquary, a small silver box said to contain fragments of a saint's bone. It gleams under the candlelight, more ornate than anything allowed in your cell. The abbess oversees the display with solemn pride, describing how pilgrims once kissed its surface to receive divine blessings. You catch your reflection in polished metal and shudder. The relic's shine is a temptation, a reminder that material beauty can distract even the devout. Quirky records mention sisters stealing tiny fragments of relic dust for talismans, a fringe practice anathematized by church officials but whispered about for generations. After Terce's brief meal, you head to the infirmary, where the infirmarian adjusts the placement of a straw mattress for an elderly sister. When you ask if the sister needs fresh sheets, she shakes her head. There are no excess linens, each mattress cover is counted and reused until it disintegrates completely. You press your hands together, thinking of the fine linens you once polished at home, delicate fabrics you'll never again feel between your fingers. The austere atmosphere makes you realise how much of comfort lies in fabric and texture. In the afternoon, you join novices for a lesson in altar adornment. Using only evergreens and simple wildflowers, you weave modest wreaths for the feast days. No gilded chalices, no velvet draperies, only the humble bounty of creation. Your fingers twist sprigs of ivy and laurel into garlands, the scent of pine light in the air. You pause, noting that each plant you use is deemed common property of the convent grounds. No sister may claim a favourite flower as her own. Even beauty must belong to the collective. When the abbess instructs you to store the wreaths at the altar, you carry them carefully, arms extended as if carrying rare gems. The evergreen scent fills your senses, bridging the gap between deprivation and delight. Historians still argue whether such stripped-down aesthetics deepened spiritual focus or merely reflected economic necessity. But you understand that here, every object, no matter how simple, holds significance precisely because it is shared. As evening approaches, a visiting merchant arrives to deliver communal candles for Vespers. He offers the abbess a single slender beeswax candle, polished to a honeyed sheen. The abbess inspects it before accepting, and you watch the merchant roll away on creaking wheels. The nun beside you murmurs, silently of course, that a single beeswax candle could cost more than a day's wages for a labourer. You tremble at the thought of such luxury, knowing it will be a gift to the entire community, not a personal treasure. At Compline, you light the communal candle and carry its glow back to your cell. The single flame casts elongated shadows on the stone walls. You reach for the iron ring at your waist, tracing its cold surface one last time before tucking it beneath your habit. As you lie on your pallet, you feel the emptiness of your sparse cell settle around you. No brush to smooth your hair, no book of poems to read, no keepsakes to soften the stern stone. Yet in that emptiness, you perceive a profound unity with your sisters, with centuries of nuns before you, and with a spiritual tradition that prizes self-denial above all else. You close your eyes, focusing on the rhythmic glow of the candle's flame, In the absence of possessions, even the faintest light becomes a treasure, and as sleep claims you, you dream not of gold and silk, but of the simple warmth of communal candles and the shared devotion that binds you all. You wake to the distant toll of the convent's gate bell, a sound that vibrates through the corridors like an invitation and a warning. Today, the parlour will open for visitors, an event as rare as a red rose blooming in winter. You smooth the folds of your habit and join the procession to the guest house, passing the silent cloister where dew beads on the rosemary. Your heart thuds in your throat, for encounters with outsiders are governed by so many rules they border on ceremony. At the heavy oak door of the parlour, you pause to adjust your wimple, ensuring no stray hair escapes. A novice sister reminds you in a curt nod that modesty is paramount. Eye contact is limited. Curtsies replace all greetings, and speech must be approved by the prioress. Historians still argue whether such strict protocols protected the sisters' chastity or merely reinforced patriarchal control. But you feel both safeguarded and constrained by the ritual's rigidity. The door swings open to admit a small delegation, 3 townspeople bearing gifts of cheese, honeycomb, and a beautifully carved wooden box said to hold relic dust. You step forward, gloved hands folded at your waist, and lower your eyes in deference. A breeze stirs the curtains, and the faint aroma of lavender oil drifts in, an odd luxury used to welcome esteemed guests. One merchant coughs from the chill, and the prioress signals you to offer water, using a small ewer and goblet whose metal gleams in the candlelight. You present the goblet with both hands, careful that your sleeves do not brush the rim, for even a single smudge could offend. As the visitors settle, the prioress gestures for one sister to display the relic dust. You watch the silver reliquary slide open, revealing its pale contents. The hamlet's mayor steps forward, dips a finger, and sprinkles a pinch of dust onto a scrap of parchment before tucking it into his breast. This act, you learn, promises blessings on the village fields. A mainstream fact, medieval nunneries were centres of pilgrimage, attracting outsiders eager for spiritual favours and miracle cures. You hide a flicker of envy, how you long for the world beyond these stone walls. When conversation is permitted, it's not a true dialogue, but a series of scripted exchanges. The visitors ask about the convent's health, the size of its orchards, and its needs for winter stores. In response, the prioress grants brief, measured words. Our sisters fare well. God provides. Your offerings gladden our hearts. You're allowed only to repeat the final phrase, never to improvise. It feels like reciting lines from a play in which you've memorised your part but never practised the pauses. Outside the window, you catch glimpses of the courtyard, stacks of firewood, wheelbarrows of turnips, hens pecking for stray barley. One guest asks about the orchards, and you almost gesture toward the budding apple trees just beyond the wall. Instead, you bow and repeat, God provides, the words catching in your throat like stale bread. You wonder if the visitor notices the restraint or simply sees dutiful obedience. At the end of the audience, the prioress presents each visitor with a small token, a sprig of rosemary tied with a length of wool. Rosemary, you recall, symbolises remembrance, a quirky custom that scholars still debate for its origins. Some say it emerged from pagan harvest rites, others that it's a Christian adaptation symbolising faith. You watch the guests accept the sprigs, their faces softening with gratitude. As the visitors depart, you follow behind them, carrying the wooden box of relic dust. The gate closes with a reverberating thud, sealing you back into silence. You walk through the empty courtyard, holding the box like a fragile promise. Back in the refectory, you see the cheese and honey set aside for the sisters' table, an indulgence reserved for feast days. You help slice the cheese with a communal knife, savouring the creamy taste, and wonder why a humble dairy treat feels like a stolen treasure. Later, you're summoned to the parlour again, this time to oversee the proper storage of the gift box. The cellarer instructs you to place it on the highest shelf in the sacristy, where only senior sisters may retrieve it. You climb the narrow ladder, mindful of your balance in clogs, and nestle the box among velvet-lined reliquaries. The warmth of the wooden box seeps into your cloak, and you imagine the relic dust's rumoured power coursing through your fingertips. That evening, after Vespers, you gather with the novices in the cloister for a debrief led by the prioress. She asks what impressions the visitors made, encouraging you to speak, yet reminding you that only one word of reflection is permitted. A novice sister quietly mouths the designated word into the prioress's waiting ear, and you surprise yourself by feeling disappointment that you cannot speak freely. It's as though a dream of conversation was snatched away before you could grasp it. Returning to your cell, you light a small beeswax candle and hold the rosemary sprig given to the sisters. The scent is potent, stirring memories of the parlour's lavender oil. You trace its slender leaves between your fingers, reflecting on the paradox of visitors' rules, a glimpse of the outside world framed by invisible bars of custom. As you lie down on your straw pallet, you tuck the rosemary beneath your pillow, hoping its promise of remembrance will carry beyond sleep. You slip into the scriptorium just after dawn, the only light coming from narrow windows and flickering rushlights set in iron sconces along the walls. The air is thick with the scent of beeswax and ink. It curls around you like a warm shawl as you approach your desk. Parchment scrolls lie piled high, their edges curling with age. You settle on your wooden stool, feeling the familiar ache in your wrists from yesterday's chores, and prepare to begin another day of manuscript labour. Here, in these hushed chambers, the nuns devote their hands and hearts to copying and illuminating sacred texts, work that, by the 14th century, was widespread across Western Europe's nunneries and immensely influential in preserving ancient writings. Historians still argue whether convent schools produced the finest manuscripts or whether professional scriptoria in male monasteries held that title. But you know that the fine lettering you craft will travel far beyond these cloistered walls. You unroll a fresh piece of vellum, sheets made from calfskin, stretched and treated until they gleam like ivory tablets. Gripping your quill, you dip its sharpened tip into iron gall ink, watching the dark liquid cling to the nib. Your task today is to copy a portion of the Gospel of John. You begin forming the letters, slender, graceful uncials that rise and fall across the page. With each stroke, your quill rasping softly, you feel your breath synchronise with the rhythmic dance of pen on parchment. Alongside the lettering, you add marginal illustrations in vivid pigments, crimson made from ground cinnabar, ultramarine derived from crushed lapis lazuli, gold leaf applied with meticulous care. The convent's records boast that your community uses over 20 pounds of lapis annually, a testament to their devotion, though some voices whisper that such lavish expense contradicts vows of poverty. Quirky rumour insists that a few mischievous sisters once hid tiny lapis nuggets in their habits as secret treasures, but no proof ever surfaced. Scholars still debate whether lapis trade for convents was funded by noble patronage or by discreet sales of surplus manuscripts. But for you, the shimmer of ultramarine feels like catching a fragment of heaven itself. Midway through the morning, the abbess slips into the scriptorium, her veiled face solemn. She examines your work, the precision of your script, the brightness of your pigments. Without a word, she gestures toward a small reed basket at her feet. You lift it to find a gift. Fresh goat's milk cheese wrapped in cloth and a slender stick of cinnamon. A rare treat. You bite into the soft cheese and its tangy flavour cutting through the dust of parchment. And you almost laugh at the absurdity of celebrating manuscript progress with dairy. Yet you savour it with gratitude. By midday your eyes sting from the close focus. You rest your quill and trace the letters you've already written, letting your fingers absorb their curves. You study the miniature you painted yesterday, Mary Magdalene at the tomb, her face rendered in soft ochre tones. It's a mainstream iconographic motif, yet you added a modern twist, a tiny snail curled at her feet, an in-joke referencing the slim chances of nuns ever leaving the cloister. You tuck that cheeky detail into your memory. After all, humour must hide in plain sight. As afternoon light slants through the window, you join another sister at a low table to prepare fresh pigments. You grind cinnabar between smooth stones until it forms a fine powder, inhaling a trace of mercury's bitter tang, an occupational hazard that sisters endured unknowingly. You mix the pigment with glaire, a binding medium made from egg whites, whisked until frothy. The sisters sometimes argued whether mixing glaire made the best paint or if gum arabic, a resin imported from distant lands, offered greater luminosity. Historians still debate which binder yielded the most enduring colours, but here you trust tradition and keep your mortar and pestle close at hand. A novice enters to deliver a slip of parchment bearing corrections from the abbess. You wash your hands and read the notes, adjust the spacing of your letters, deepen the gold leaf's burnish, and redraw the chalice behind the saint's halo. You nod and set to work, your routine precise yet meditative. The scriptorium's quiet murmur, a collective hum of concentration, envelops you. Occasionally, the silence breaks with the discreet clatter of pigment jars or the soft scrape of a knife shaving quill feathers. It's like a concert of tiny instruments performing a symphony of devotion. Late in the day, a gentle breeze drifts through an open window, carrying the scent of hay from the nearby fields. You pause your work to gaze outside, noticing the straw bales stacked against the barn wall. Do you remember trying to balance on a bale as a child, convinced you could tightrope across a river? Here, balance is crucial too. Balancing vibrant colour with reverence, humour with humility, artistry with obedience. With the last page of the gospel text nearing completion, you apply gold leaf to the illuminated initial, a painstaking process. You brush on a layer of gesso, let it set until tacky, then lay down the delicate gold. Your breath catches as you gently burnish it with a smooth agate tool, watching it catch the light in a blaze of brilliance. This moment feels miraculous, as if you've touched eternity with your fingertips. As dusk falls and candles are lit, you clean your tools and gather your completed pages. The abbess returns to inspect your progress, nodding approvingly at the gleaming gold and crisp lettering. No words are spoken, but her satisfied gaze says more than any critique. You carefully roll the scrolls and store them in their leather satchel for safekeeping until tomorrow's binding session. You extinguish the last rushlight, feeling the hush deepen as the scriptorium empties. You run your hands along the polished desktop, grateful for the smooth grain, and whisper a silent prayer of thanks for your calloused fingers and steady hand. The labour of manuscript copying, with all its meticulous demands and hidden joys, binds you to generations of sisters who came before, a tapestry of ink and faith woven across centuries. Before you depart, you pause in the doorway, inhaling one last breath of beeswax and pigment. In the stillness, the scriptorium feels alive, a sacred workshop where art and devotion merge. You step out, leaving the glow of your gold leaf behind, carrying with you the quiet pride of having crafted a sliver of divine light on vellum. You glide through the dimly lit corridor toward the penitential chapel, every footstep softened by the thick wool of your habit. The scent of damp stone and burning tallow hangs in the air, mingling with the distant murmur of a solitary bell. Before you stands the iron grille of the confessional, its bars polished smooth by 1,000 whispered secrets. You draw in a breath, feeling the cool draught that slips through the metal mesh, and you grasp the edge of the wooden kneeler, its surface worn by centuries of humble knees. As you bow your head, you recall that private confession became mandatory for all Christians after the Fourth Lateran Council in 1215, a mainstream historical fact that reshaped medieval piety. The council decreed that every soul must confess mortal sins at least once a year to receive absolution. Yet here, within the convent's walls, confession is practiced weekly, even daily if a sister's conscience demands it. Historians still argue whether this frequency fostered genuine spiritual cleansing or bred unhealthy scrupulosity, but for you, the iron screen feels less a barrier and more a bridge to unburdened peace. A frail voice greets you from the other side, soft and low, as though carried on a prayer's breath. You whisper your name and the date, an odd ritual that feels like signing a petition to your own purity. The confessor's murmured response is a gentle assurance, but you're already trembling at the thought of unspooling your sins. Your heart hammers, each beat echoing in your ears like a drum. You take a steadying breath, pressing your forehead to the grill, and begin. I have spoken harshly to another sister. You confess, voice quivering. I envied her new mantle. A pause follows, a brief hush that feels as weighty as judgment. Repent, my child, comes the reply, and offer 3 paters and 1 forgive us for every harsh word. You swallow and continue. I coveted the abbess's private candle. Another pause. Use your 1 word of kindness this week to offer light to another. Words tumble out, secret glances, hidden laughter at the board of silence's wooden angels, the small bell you dared attach to your belt in jest. Each admission feels like peeling away a layer of your soul. You've heard quirky tales of nuns confessing to talking back to saintly statues or stealing scraps of lapis lazuli, and you're not immune to such odd temptations. A mischievous part of you regrets confessing the glitter on your fingertips, but you steel yourself against pride. Your confessor offers gentle corrections, penances of prayer, alms, or extra choir duties, tailored to each sin. You accept them with bowed head. Despite the severity, you feel relief trickling through you, as though each whispered fault is a pebble lifted from your heart. It's said that some monasteries kept a confessional ledger recording every penance, an institutional memory of transgression that later intrigued scholars, though many still debate the accuracy of such records. When you at last rise, the cold of the chapel feels bracing, a reminder that atonement is both cool and cleansing. You step back into the corridor, the wink of torchlight dancing along the stone walls. Your knees protest as you straighten, but you carry a newfound lightness in your chest. You let your fingers trail across the grill, imagining the wrought iron vines symbolising Christ's embrace of penitent souls. At Vespers later, you kneel with the sisters, repeating the psalms with renewed focus. The echo of Kyrie Ellison vibrates through the vaulted ceiling, and you sense that each Ellison is an exhalation of contrition. You listen to the cantor's steady pitch, letting it cradle your heartbeat. Do you remember humming along to your favourite podcast intro? This feels more sacred, a gentle, ancient lullaby for your spirit. In the refectory after evening prayer, you seat yourself at the table, savouring a rare treat of honeyed bread offered by the infirmarian as a reward for faithful penance. The sweetness melts on your tongue like a whispered blessing. You recall that honey was often used in medieval medicine to soothe ailments, another quirky crossover of spiritual and physical healing. Historians still argue whether such edible alms were intended as true remedies or merely symbolic gestures of mercy. As you rise to leave, a sister pats your hand in silent solidarity, a subtle nod that speaks volumes in a place where words are scarce. You feel the warmth of her gesture spread through you, a reminder that confession is not a solitary affair but a communal act of care. The convent's network of support hums beneath the austere exterior, a tapestry of whispered forgiveness and shared penance. Back in your cell, you light a single beeswax candle and place it on the windowsill. Its flame flickers, casting dancing shadows across the rough plaster walls. You kneel beside your straw pallet and offer the penances you were given. 3. Our Fathers in the hush of night. Your lips barely moving. The silence swells around you, but now it feels nurturing, a vessel for your whispered prayers. You rest your forehead on folded hands, tasting the faint sweetness of beeswax and honeyed bread still lingering on your tongue. Sleep calls to you in a gentle chorus, and you surrender, knowing that your confessions have seeded peace in your soul. The iron screen recedes behind your closed eyes, and you drift into dreams wrapped in absolution's soft embrace. You awaken to the soft glow of dawn filtering through the small cross-shaped window in your cell, but instead of the usual confinement, today you taste an unfamiliar thrill. The abbess has granted you permission to walk the outer circuit of the cloister walls. You fasten your habit and step into the corridor, every echo of your wooden clogs magnified by the stillness. The walls here rise 30 feet high, fashioned from thick limestone blocks, their surfaces mottled with centuries of moss and tiny climbing ivies. As you reach the gate to the outer passage, a senior sister hands you a brass lantern, its glass panels clouded with soot. You lift the latch and step through the narrow door, feeling a rush of cooler air that smells of wet earth and distant fields. Beyond the wall, you glimpse a sliver of the mundane world, thatched rooftops, grazing sheep, and the faint outlines of villagers heading to morning markets. It's a mainstream reality. Outside these walls, life pulses with commerce and laughter, but here, the cloister turns them into a muted panorama. Walking the wall's edge, you grip the iron railing and peer down the sheer drop, 20 feet to the garden path below. Historians still argue whether cloister walls were designed primarily for security against raiders or as spiritual barriers to protect the nuns' cloistered purity. Yet standing here, you sense both functions entwined. The wind tugs at your veil, and you steady yourself against the stone, feeling the cool roughness of the wall beneath your palm. Every few paces, small slits, windows too high to see through, line the wall's interior face. Some of these sound holes carried voices of labourers from below, the grind of a mill, the clip of shears, the low bleat of a lamb. You lean close, listening. The distant clang of a blacksmith's hammer rings like a clarion call to freedom, yet that clang is muffled by the mass of stone. You press your ear to the slit, heart pounding, and savour that muted rhythm, an echo of the world that once was yours. Halfway around, you arrive at a tiny wooden door set into the wall. It's the sally port, used by novices on their first supervised venture beyond the cloister. Today, you're alone, yet the abbess's choice to let you walk this boundary feels like a test of your resolve. You lift the latch and push the door open, revealing a short stone stair descending to a small courtyard. A single apple tree stands there, its branches heavy with bright green fruit, soon to ripen into rosy apples for the feast of St. Michael. You step into the courtyard and feel the sun's full warmth on your face for the first time since becoming a nun. The air smells of fresh blossoms and tilled earth. You reach up and pluck an unripe apple, feeling the cool skin under your fingertips. Historians still debate whether nuns were allowed to taste garden fruits unsupervised, but you can't resist a taste. The tart flesh snaps beneath your teeth, surprising you with its crispness. It's a quirky reminder that even within rigid walls, small indulgences can linger. The sally port remains ajar behind you, an open invitation to return to the cloister's embrace. You pause, melon of temptation in hand, and wonder, is this freedom or merely another ritual? You cast a glance through the door to the world beyond, dusty roads, farmers' carts, children running after a stray chicken. You shift your weight, and the apple's juice dribbles down your chin like stolen nectar. You swallow quickly, then let the fruit fall to the stone floor. Even this act of discarding feels like penance. Retracing your steps, you ascend the stair and push the wooden door closed behind you. The latch's click resonates louder than the blacksmith's hammer you heard below. You tuck the lantern under your arm, gripping the rough handle as though holding onto your own identity. Returning to the wall's edge, you resume your circuit, every stone beneath your foot a marker of separation. As you round the final corner, you spot a small opening, a squint or hagioscope that allows a view into the refectory. Through its narrow frame, you glimpse sisters seated at long tables, heads bowed over bowls of pottage. The scene seems surreal, like peering into another realm. You observe them for a moment, feeling a quiet kinship, and then step away, closing the view with your hand. Do you remember sneaking peeks into your family's kitchen as a child, longing for a forbidden treat? Here, that longing is sacrosanct. By midday, you finish the outer walk and step back through the cloister door into the inner courtyard. The transition feels abrupt. The garden's neat hedges and clipped boxwood seem stifled compared to the open air beyond the walls. You fold your hands and bow your head, honouring the boundary you've traversed and the vow that keeps you here. A nun passing by offers a gentle nod, the unspoken acknowledgement that you've passed the test. In the garden, you pause by the rose arch where novices are instructed to meditate on Christ's suffering. The thorns jutted from the stem remind you that liberty often comes with sacrifice. You touch a single bloom, its petals soft as a sigh, and inhale its scent. Roses cultivated here since the 11th century for prayer oils and symbolic devotion. You let a petal fall into your palm, then release it to the ground, a fleeting reminder that beauty is ephemeral and that convent walls safeguard that ephemerality. Vespers arrives, and you return to the chapel, your lantern now unneeded as the candles burn bright under the vaulted arches. Your footsteps reverberate, echoing against the stones you once traced from the top of the wall. Kneeling in your stool, you offer thanks for the brief taste of open air and the steadfast presence of the cloister's protective arms. At Compline, you extinguish your candle and make your way back to your cell. As you lie down, you feel the weight of the walls not as a burden but as a shelter, a living testament to boundaries both physical and spiritual. In the hush, you sense the stones themselves whispering stories of countless sisters who have paced this edge, each one balancing the call of the world beyond with devotion within. You close your eyes and imagine the path you walked, the apple tree's brief sweet taste still vivid on your tongue, the blacksmith's distant hammer now distant no more than a heartbeat. In this solitude, you understand that the cloister walls do more than confine. They define the space where your faith, discipline, and longing converge. And as sleep draws you in, you carry that balance with you, walking the fine line between the boundaries set around you and the freedom discovered within. You slip from the chapel into the waning daylight of the cloister garden, heart fluttering like a captured bird in your chest. Today, your thoughts swirl not around psalms or penance, but around a single forbidden spark, an affection you never expected to find within these hallowed walls. As you adjust your wimple, the soft wool brushes against your cheek, and you wonder how vows of chastity, professed since the Council of Chalcedon in 451, could ever extinguish the flicker of human desire. Historians still argue whether such vows shielded nuns from worldly distraction, or merely drove longing underground. But for you, the yearning is as vivid as the late afternoon sun painting the stone pillars gold. You wander along the herb beds, inhaling the cool scent of lavender and rosemary, each aroma a gentle balm to the restlessness stirring inside. Beneath the towering yew trees, you spot Sister Marigold tending a row of catnip, an unusual herb introduced to convent gardens around the 12th century for its mild calming properties. Though some sisters whispered it invited dreamy states too alluring for strict discipline. That quirky tidbit echoes in your mind as you approach her, stomach twisting with anticipation. "Good evening, sister," you murmur, though the rule of silence insists you wait for a word of kindness. Today you're granted peace, and the single-syllable permission feels like a lifeline thrown across a stormy sea. You step closer, letting your palms brush the green leaves. You speak peace softly, and the single word grace allows you to confess the tremor in your voice. Marigold looks up, her warm brown eyes holding yours for the barest moment, an exchange more intimate than any spoken love declaration. "Do you remember the first time you texted someone at midnight, heart racing? This feels 10 times more precarious. Your fingers hover near hers, and for an instant, you taste the electric charge of contact, forbidden fruit sweeter than any apple stolen through the sallyport. The convent's teachings insist that emotional attachments distract from divine love. Yet here you stand, experiencing a bond no scripture foresaw. The rule of St. Benedict warns against curlicues of the heart, but no edict could predict the curve of Marigold's smile. You catch yourself tracing the arch of her brows with your gaze, as though mapping out an uncharted territory. Later, you steal away to the small plunge pool near the infirmary, an aquatic feature more common in male monasteries but quietly adopted in a few forward-thinking nunneries by the 14th century. A mainstream fact that reflects occasional flexibility in traditions. The water's surface ripples under your fingertips, glittering with fading daylight. You dip your hand in, marvelling at the slight chill, and imagine Marigold's skin reflecting this same pale shimmer. Your mind drifts to clandestine glances during Vespers, and the way her hymns, usually as muted as any sister's, somehow resonate louder in your chest. Historians still argue whether nuns ever truly experienced marital-style love in cloistered life, or if accounts of secret romances are later embellishments. But you feel the authenticity of your own affection in every stolen moment. A sudden breeze stirs the water, sending ripples across the stone edge. You lean forward, balancing on one knee, and imagine inviting Marigold here to share the cool water at twilight. You chuckle inwardly. After all, plotting a secret meeting in a convent garden is hardly more discreet than arranging a covert picnic under a classroom desk. Your thoughts are interrupted by the distant clang of a spoon dropped in the refectory below. Reflexively, you press your lips together, wishing you could laugh out loud. You settle for a silent snort, a private rebellion against your vow of sombre composure. A bevy of daisies at the pool's edge shivers in the breeze, as though amused by your inner turmoil. As dusk deepens, you return to your cell, mind still awash in longing. You close the heavy wooden door behind you and press your back against it, taking a moment to breathe. The cool iron ring at your waist feels heavier today, a weighty reminder of vows that contradict every beat of your heart. You tread carefully across the straw pallet, careful not to shift the linen, and sit to unlace your sandals, another intimate act you never expected to savour among sisters. Opening the small window, you let in the fragrant night air. Moonlight spills across the stone floor, illuminating motes of dust that drift like silent witnesses to your hidden desires. You close your eyes and imagine Marigold here beside you, sharing the silence and this fragile beauty. You trace the outline of the wooden rosary on your belt, each bead a step toward your vow, and yet, paradoxically, a reminder of the steps you take toward her. In the hush, you recall a fringe account of a 13th century nun who penned love sonnets to a fellow sister under a pile of discarded husks, a quirky historical whisper that seems oddly comforting now. Historians still debate the authenticity of such verses, but their existence suggests hearts can't be fully contained by stone walls or strict rules. Your breath slows as sleep tugs at your consciousness. You fold your hands, fingers interlaced, and whisper a prayer for clarity. And, secretly, a prayer for Marigold's safety and happiness. The candle beside your pallet flickers, casting a trembling glow that mirrors your emotions. In the silence, you sense love's presence more profoundly than ever, a quiet rebellion blooming in the moonlit garden of your heart. You lie down, pulling the rough blanket up to your chin. Sleep beckons on feather-like wings, and you surrender to its gentle embrace. Dreams threaded with lavender, moonlight, and the warmth of forbidden affection. You wake to the hush of midnight, not dawn, as the convent's great clock tower tolls 12 gentle chimes. Your heart flutters. This is one of the rare nocturnal liberties granted by the abbess on festival nights, a concession whispered about among novices as the midnight promenade. Historians still argue whether these allowances were remnants of pre-Christian rituals or strategic morale boosters, but to you, this moonlit ritual feels like a secret handshake between the divine and the earthly. Slipping from your straw pallet, You dress quickly in your habit, mindful of the soft swish of wool against the stone floor. The lantern you carry bears just enough oil for an hour's wander. You tiptoe past the silent cells of your sisters, imagining their dreams woven of psalms and candlelight. You pause at the infirmary door, where gentle snores drift out, an odd comfort reminding you that even those bound by vows need rest. You press on, lantern in hand, and step into the cloister. The courtyard yawned under a pale silver moon, the fountains hushed and the flower beds ghostly in the dim light. Without the bustle of day, each rosemary bush and yew tree appears more resolute, standing sentinel around the paved path. You set your lantern down briefly, listening to the distant call of an owl, nature's own tolling bell, more haunting than any monastery's. You inhale the cool night air, tasting the faint hint of lavender still clinging to the stones from Vespers. You join a small circle of sisters already gathered near the sallyport, their faces half hidden in the lantern glow. They offer low smiles, no words permitted, but the shared curiosity sparkles like starlight in their eyes. Beneath your habit's folds, you feel the gentle thrum of camaraderie, a reminder that even behind stone walls, community can flourish in these unscripted moments. Together, you pass through the sallyport and step into the orchard beyond the cloister walls. The white blossom trees arch overhead, petals drifting like snow under the moon. The earth feels softer here, a plush carpet muffling your footsteps. A handful of petals floats down onto your habit, cool against your cheek. You wonder if this space, normally off-limits, was once used for pagan spring celebrations before being consecrated for Christ. Quirky lore suggests some abbesses retain these customs to ease novice transitions, though scholars still debate whether such syncretism ever truly existed. You wander beneath an ancient apple tree, its bark etched with the initials of sisters past, generations who stake their silent claim to one stolen blossom or moonlit stroll. You press your palm against the trunk, feeling its rough furrows, and offer a silent prayer of gratitude for this borrowed freedom. The orchard seems alive, breathing with the warmth of sunlight you can only imagine, now cooled by midnight's whisper. In the distance, the abbess's bell delicately tinkles, a signal that the procession will soon return. But before you re-enter the cloister, you spot a scullery maid sleeping near the barn, her breath visible in the chill air. A pang of guilt stabs your heart. This privilege feels unearned compared to the labourers toiling beyond these walls. Still, you can't shake the thrill of stepping outside the daily routine of prayer and penance. The wind stirs the lantern's flame, causing it to dance and sputter. You refill its wick from a hidden stash of tallow, a fringe courtesy for festival nights, careful not to spill a drop. The lantern's renewed glow illuminates the orchard path as you trace your steps back, imagining the flowers opening to the moon's gentle gaze. Historians still question the extent of these nocturnal liberties. But here, under this silver sky, theory gives way to wonder. Re-entering the cloister by the sallyport, you find the secret door already closing, an echo of your own fingers brushing its frame. You slip back inside, heart humming, and follow the lantern-lit stones to the chapel porch. There, a small brass tray holds tiny cakes of spiced honey bread, a seasonal treat reserved for these occasions. You take one, its warmth comforting against the night chill, and bite into the soft crumb. The sweetness lodges in your mind like a stolen memory. You distribute the cakes in silence, passing them among sisters who nibble gratefully, crumbs falling onto the flagstones. As you chew, you remember that medieval celebration days, saints' feast days and harvest festivals often included these seasonal allowances, with honey bread and spiced wine brought in clandestinely. Some convent chronicles mention sisters hiding flasks of spiced wine beneath the chapel bench, an illicit comfort that earned them both laughter and rebuke. Scholars still debate whether these indulgences were widespread or isolated acts of rebellion, but their whispers reached your ears long before your first feast. The abbess emerges on the chapel steps, her face serene in the lantern light. She raises her hand in a blessing, and you press your palm to your heart, savouring the moment's solemn magic. Though no words are spoken, the gesture says, "Enjoy this gift, you faithful few." A single tear glints on your cheek, carried by the soft wind. You extinguish your lantern in a nearby brazier, leaving its single flame to glow warmly. The orchard recedes into shadow, and you follow the flicker through the cloister arches until the brazier's light vanishes behind you. The hush of night envelops you again, and you feel both exhilarated and humbled by the borrowed hour. Slipping back to your cell, you tuck the final crumbs of honey bread into a folded cloth beneath your mattress, a secret souvenir. You change into your night tunic, every movement laden with memory of cold air, moonlit petals, and silent laughter. The convent's usual stillness feels different now, less like an obligation and more like a sacred vessel holding both discipline and delight. Lying down on your straw pallet, you close your eyes and imagine the hidden paths of the orchard, the ancient apples swaying in night breezes, and the hush broken only by your own soft breath. You whisper a prayer of thanks for this uncommon liberty, one that entwines devotion with simple joy. Then, as sleep draws you into its gentle embrace, you drift on dreams dusted with moonlight and honeyed warmth, the memory of midnight's gift lingering in the quiet depths of your heart. You awaken before dawn's first light, the memory of midnight's orchard liberty still warm in your thoughts, and quickly dress in your habit. Today marks your initiation as a teacher for the newest novices, an unexpected twist in your journey from pupil to guide. The abbess greets you with a solemn nod, handing you a stack of small wax tablets and a stylus. "Lit them gently," she murmurs. You feel a flutter in your chest, recalling your own trepidation when you first held these tablets. Historians still argue whether medieval convents prioritized rigorous intellectual training or strictly manual labour for novices, but today you carry the responsibility of both knowledge and nurture. In the candlelit classroom, once the guest parlour, you arrange benches in neat rows. A dozen wide-eyed novices file in, their habits crisp and their heads freshly tonsured. They clutch tiny copies of the Vita Christi, a popular 14th century devotional text that weaves Christ's life into daily prayer. A mainstream historical fact. By the late Middle Ages, convent schools often used Vita Christi as the primary teaching tool for novices' memorization and contemplation. You greet the newcomers with a gentle bow, noting the tremor in your own voice as you address them. Today, we learn how to read the Lord's Prayer in Latin, you announce quietly. You begin by demonstrating the proper way to hold the stylus, tracing the first words, Pater Noster, qui es in caelis. Each syllable tastes foreign in your mouth, yet familiar from years of recitation during the divine office. A novice frowns at her tablet, stylus poised uncertainly. You lean closer, guiding her hand in small, precise movements. The tick of stylus on wax echoes through the silent chamber, an auditory punctuation to your whispered lesson. As the novices copy, you recite the prayer's meaning in soft vernacular. Our Father, who art in heaven. You watch their lips form the ancient words, channeling devotion through simple wax and wood. You recall your own first lesson, when you accidentally carved a jagged groove into the tablet and were teased, silently, of course, by your peers. A quirky tidbit. Some novices use the wax tablets to carve tiny hearts or hidden initials, covert love notes disguised as pious practice. Scholars still debate whether these carvings were innocent doodles or subtle acts of rebellion against strict rules, but you can't help smiling at the thought. Once the novices finish the first line, you collect the tablets and display a beautifully illustrated page from a communal prayer book. The miniature shows Christ teaching on a mountaintop, flanked by apostolic figures. You explain how medieval artists often included local landmarks in these illuminations, a mainstream detail that connected sacred stories to everyday life. You point to a tiny depiction of a watermill tucked into the corner of the scene. See the wheel? That's our own mill, rendered by a sister painter who longed for home. The novices gasp softly, their eyes lighting up at the blend of divine narrative and domestic familiarity. Next, you introduce a chant exercise. Pulling a small reed pipe from beneath your gown, a relic of your novice days, you demonstrate the melody for the hymn Ave Maria. The novices watch in rapt silence as you blow a single, pure note. They mimic with simple shepherd's flutes carved from willow. Their first attempts sound tentative, but gradually the notes coalesce into harmonious thirds. You chuckle inwardly, remembering your own early squeaks that nearly fractured chapel windows. Do you remember tuning your guitar by ear in college? Here, tuning is a divine art, and every off-pitch note is corrected with a soft hiss from a sister mentor. Historians still argue whether melodic instruction in convents enhanced spiritual experience or distracted from solemnity, but you sense your novices growing in both skill and confidence. Mid-morning ushers in a break for prayer and reflection. You lead the novices to the cloister garden, where a carved stone bench under an oak tree awaits. You distribute vellum scrapings, a byproduct of manuscript work, and pens dipped in powdered charcoal. Write a short reflection on what you learned. You instruct. The novices kneel, stylus in hand, then scratch out sentences in neat script. One young sister writes, "I feel my heart quiet when I greet Mary in song." Another confesses, "The Lord's Prayer is heavier in Latin, as if each syllable carries more weight." You nod thoughtfully. Such insights, though simple, reveal budding spiritual wisdom. After reflection, you gather the novices for a lesson in botanical scripture. You guide them through the herb garden, pausing at each row of medicinal plants. Holding up a sprig of lavender, you explain its biblical symbolism of purity and mourning. You pluck a leaf, crush it between your fingers, and let the scent fill the air. Just as God's mercy soothes the soul, this scent calms the mind. A fringe practice once had some sisters adding crushed lavender to their ink, believing it gave their writing a spiritual fragrance. Scholars still debate whether this practice actually occurred or is later legend, but you share it as an anecdote, watching novices marvel at the intertwining of faith and flora. Lunchtime arrives, and you march the novices to the refectory. You sit at the head of the table, where wolf-eyed respect. As broth is served, you remind them of mealtime virtue. No slurping, no unnecessary speech. One novice drops a spoon, a nearby sister flicks her wrist in the familiar non-verbal quiet gesture. You suppress a grin and offer a gentle wink, your secret signal that she'll survive this awkward moment. The abbess watches from her elevated seat, nodding approvingly. You feel a surge of pride under your guidance. The novices are learning not only sacred texts, but also the subtle language of convent life. In the afternoon, you convene a debate on a simple theological question. What does "forgive us our trespasses" truly mean? You encourage the novices to speak, one at a time, each using the precious word of reflection allowance. Tentative hands rise, and shy voices offer ideas about communal forgiveness and personal humility. Perhaps forgiveness is a mirror, reflecting our own mercy, suggests one. Another counters, or it's a key that unlocks God's heart to us. You moderate, weaving their thoughts into a tapestry of contemplation. Historians still argue over the exact medieval understanding of penance versus mercy. But here you witness the living debate in your novices' budding insights. As Vespers approaches, you end the session with a simple prayer. May your hearts remain open to learning and to love. The novices bow deeply, their eyes bright with newfound purpose. You collect the styluses and tablets, imagining the glow in their faces when they retell these lessons to future postulants. Back in your cell that evening, you trace the grains of your wax tablets with tired fingers, recalling each moment of today's lessons. The echoes of scribbling styluses and sweet pipe notes still resonate in your mind like an unfinished hymn. You kneel by your pallet, offering a silent prayer of gratitude for the chance to guide others along this path you once walked. The gentle weight of responsibility settles on your shoulders, familiar as your habit's wool and as comforting as the hush of the scriptorium. As sleep beckons, you drift into dreams of wax tablets glowing in candlelight, novices' eager faces illuminated by both flame and faith. You smile, knowing that tomorrow you will rise again to nurture these budding sisters, shaping both their minds and their spirits within these enduring walls. You awaken to the muted clang of the infirmary bell, its single toll carrying through the cool pre-dawn air and drawing you toward a day steeped in healing rites. Pulling on your habit, you feel the familiar weight of its wool settle on your shoulders, a tangible reminder that health and devotion often go hand in hand in the convent's walls. Today, your task is to prepare the section's famed medicinal elixir of life and administer a series of curious remedies to the ailing sisters. The infirmary's low-ceilinged chamber lies bathed in dawn's grey light, rows of straw pallets aligned like silent sentinels. At its head stands the infirmarian, a kindly yet stoic woman versed in both prayerful care and the convent's herbarium. She greets you wordlessly and gestures toward a wooden table laden with ingredients, bundles of dried yarrow, small clay jars of dried comfrey root, vials of vinegar infused with rue, and a curious silver canister purported to hold powdered unicorn horn, a fringe relic thought to have miraculous properties, though scholars still debate whether such powders were ever truly used or merely symbolic tokens of faith. You begin with the mainstream remedy, a poultice of comfrey and honey. Comfrey, known since antiquity for its bone-healing qualities, was a staple in medieval infirmaries. You crush the dried root in a mortar and pestle, its earthy aroma rising in a comforting cloud. The infirmarian adds a dollop of honey from the communal apiary. Its sweetness binds the poultice and lends mild antibacterial strength. You stir the mixture until thick and spread it onto a strip of linen. Sister Agnes, her wrist fractured after a fall in the garden, lies propped on pillows. You apply the compress to her swollen joint, pressing gently as she winces. "This will ease the pain," you murmur, though speech is a rarity here. The infirmary allows soft words of comfort. Next, you turn to the yarrow infusion, a mainstream potion reputed to staunch bleeding and reduce fevers. You measure a handful of dried blossoms into a clay pot, pour boiling water over them, and cover the vessel. As it steeps, you recall that yarrow's use dates to Galenic medicine, and many nuns fiercely embrace such ancient wisdom. Yet other sisters distrusted pagan roots. Sparking debates still alive in scholarly circles? Did convents truly blend classical medicine with Christian care? Or did they shun secular law? Today, you honour both traditions as you strain the infusion into a cup. For Sister Beatrice, whose cough racks her frail frame, you administer the yarrow tea in small sips, instructing her to breathe slowly between swallows. She thanks you with a grateful nod, the first sound she's uttered all morning. You tuck her blanket around her shoulders, noting the way her eyes brightened with each warm mouthful. With the tea steeping, you prepare the most peculiar remedy, the renowned convent St. Hildegard's cordials, a blend of rose petals, fennel seeds, and a drop of the unicorn horn powder, if only as a gesture of faith. Rose petals symbolise Mary's purity, and fennel eases indigestion. The powder, if enchanted, promises spiritual fortitude. You crush the petals and seeds, mix them with warm water, and sprinkle a pinch of the silver dust. The infirmarian watches, arching a single eyebrow but saying nothing. You hand the cordial to Sister Margaret, who suffers from chronic headaches. She sips tentatively, then breathes a sigh that seems to lift some weight from her mind. Between treatments, you tend the herb garden, pruning fresh sprigs of rue and calendula. Rue's bitter scent tangles in your nostrils as you bruisingly strip leaves into a bowl. Calendula's bright petals you reserve for salves to soothe skin irritations. A novice nearby pops a rue leaf into her mouth, making a face at the acrid taste, a fringe practice some sisters indulge to test their fortitude. You gently remind her that discipline and caution go hand in hand, even in sacred healing. Midday brings the arrival of an outside physician summoned by the abbess for a severe case of fever. He examines Sister Cecilia with professional detachment. Consulting his leather-bound compendium, he prescribes a cupping therapy, a procedure regarded with both reverence and suspicion. You assist by heating the glass cups over a brazier, watching each cup's rim glow orange. Once warm, you quickly press them onto Cecilia's back, creating suction as the skin rises into the cups. The process draws blood and bad humours, as according to Galenic theory. Sister Cecilia gasps, then relaxes as the cups are removed and her flesh is an array of circular bruises. The physician nods approvingly, and you silently wipe the sweat from his brow. Some convent records decried cupping as barbaric, while others praised its efficacy, and you reflect on the ongoing debate among historians about medieval practitioners' ethical boundaries. With the physician departed, you turn to the infirmary's final task, tending to the Lazarus well, a cold water plunge reputed to cure lethargy and spiritual malaise. Some sisters shiver during the brief dip, others emerge radiant. You stand at the tank's edge, instructing Sister Juliana to immerse her shoulders. The shock of cold water makes her gasp, then laugh, a rare sound that breaks the infirmary's hush. As she steps out, you wrap her in a warm woolen cloak, watching as her colour returns. As dusk approaches, you record the day's treatments in the convent's health ledger, adding notes on each remedy's effects. The cracking quill and scrawled ink feel almost sacred. This ledger serves as both practical guide and repository of communal memory. You note that the comfrey poultice likely saved Sister Agnes's wrist from permanent damage, and that Sister Beatrice's cough lessened after 2 cups of yarrow infusion. Even the unicorn horn cordial earns a footnote, though you list the powder with an asterisk. Efficacy uncertain, spiritual effect significant. Before retiring, you place fresh sprigs of chamomile by each pallet, a final soothing gift. The infirmarian offers you a single word of kindness. Repose. You inhale that word deeply, letting it fill you with calm. You kneel beside your own pallet, tracing your rosary beads as you whisper a prayer of thanksgiving for the day's labours. Lying down, you feel the comforting weight of both physical tiredness and the fulfilling sense of having eased others' suffering. The infirmary's silence settles around you like a healing cloak, each breath a reminder that faith, medicine, and devotion are inextricably entwined within these sacred walls. As sleep calls you home, you drift into dreams of herb gardens, honeyed poultices, and the quiet miracle of healing hands guided by prayer. Section 16. Dawn's first grey light filters through your cell's narrow slit, rousing you for a day that will test both your humility and your savvy. Today, you ascend the hidden staircase to the abbess's private chamber, an honour reserved for the convent's senior sisters, to help orchestrate the delicate power dynamics of monastic hierarchy. You wrap your habit's woolen folds tight around you and tread softly through silent corridors, each echo a reminder of the rigid structure binding every sister to her place. At the top of the stairs, you find the abbess seated at her heavy oak desk, quills and parchments arrayed before her. She hands you a list, duties to assign, disputes to adjudicate, favours to grant or deny. Though obedience demands you carry out her will without question, you bear the weight of these choices keenly. Historians still argue whether nunneries offered women genuine agency within a patriarchal society or simply replicated worldly power struggles behind closed doors. But here, You hold a measure of influence that can uplift or chastise your peers. Your first task: resolve a disagreement between the prioress and the cellarer over the allocation of wine for Easter celebrations. The prioress insists on a richer vintage to honour the feast, while the cellarer warns of dwindling stores. You weigh their arguments, recalling that medieval convents often managed vineyards as both spiritual labour and economic asset, a mainstream fact illustrating their worldly responsibilities. You propose a compromise: allocate half the vintage to the refectory for the feast day and reserve the remainder for medicinal uses in the infirmary. Both women nod in reluctant agreement, acknowledging that compromise maintains both piety and prudence. Next, the abbess asks for your counsel on a novice's request to visit her family for the funeral of her father. Vows of cloistered life strictly forbid leaving the convent, yet compassion tugs at your heart. You remember accounts of rare retreat permissions granted for dire family emergencies, a quirky concession recorded in some abbeys' chronicles, though scholars still debate its legitimacy. You suggest allowing the visit under strict supervision and set a clear return date and a penance of 10 Our Fathers upon her return to balance mercy with monastic discipline. The abbess approves, her gaze softening as she dusts your shoulder with a silent blessing. By mid-morning, you move to sorting petitions from local villagers seeking sanctuary for wayward souls or shelter for travellers. Some requests are mundane: permission for a peddler to sleep in the guest house, while others are weighty: a widow seeking protection from an abusive steward. You draft careful responses, emphasising the convent's role as both spiritual haven and community pillar. Historians still debate whether female religious houses serve primarily as refuges or as instruments of church authority, but you sense the real human stakes behind each letter. At midday, you convene a council in the chapter house, a circular room of polished stone seats where sisters gather to deliberate community matters. You present the morning's resolutions to the prioress, cellarer, infirmarian, and novice mistress. Their eyes rest on you as you read each outcome, and you see both respect and relief that a fair hand led the decisions. You feel a quiet pride in balancing compassion and order, qualities essential to sustaining the convent's delicate ecosystem. After the council, you escort the abbess to the cloister garden for her midday meal. You carry a linen napkin and a bowl of rice gruel, ensuring her needs are met without fuss. As she eats, you listen to her soft breathing and consider the pressure she bears: spiritual guide, economic manager, maternal figure. No text prepared her for the weight of hundreds of souls relying on her counsel. You offer brief updates in measured tones, careful not to overstep your subordinate role even as you advise. In the afternoon, a dispute arises between two novices over shared manuscript duties. One claims the other monopolises the best pigments. You bring them together in the scriptorium and mediate, teaching them to take turns with the lapis and to share any surplus equally. You recount a legend of two medieval sisters who resolved a similar quarrel by alternating pigment use and binding their manuscript pages together, an anecdote that brings tentative smiles. Scholars still debate the veracity of this tale, but its moral remains clear: harmony fosters creativity. Late in the day, you compile the community's annual report to the bishop, detailing records of alms given, lands maintained, and spiritual works performed. Your neat script and thorough summations promise to reflect well on the convent's reputation. You recall that such reports could affect the community's legal privileges and tax assessments, a mainstream responsibility that underscores the sisters' worldly influence behind pious walls. As dusk falls, you return the list of petitions to the abbess. She nods approvingly and touches your hand, a rare, silent benediction of gratitude. You bow deeply, your heart warmed by the gesture. Though your role lies in the shadows of authority, the impact of your decisions ripples through the community, shaping daily life and preserving balance. Back in your cell, you cross off today's tasks in your private notebook. A small luxury few novices enjoy, but permitted to you as reward for service. You trace the inked lines with the fingertip, recalling the faces in the council house and the scent of wine barrels in the cellar. Kneeling before your small crucifix, you whisper a prayer for wise leadership and unity among sisters. Lying down on your straw pallet, you feel the gentle reassurance that comes from serving both God and community. The convent's hierarchies, once enigmatic and distant, feel like a living organism you've helped tend with compassion and discernment. As sleep envelops you, you drift into dreams of polished stone halls, flickering candlelight, and the quiet satisfaction of balanced authority. You slip into the chapter house just before dawn, its circular benches empty but for the soft glow of a single candle flickering against the limestone walls. You inhale the cool, musty scent of ancient stone and polished wood, a sensory reminder that this room has borne witness to centuries of deliberation. Today, you will enter a debate that stretches far beyond the convent's walls, the true influence of medieval nunneries on society. For decades, scholars have argued that nunneries served as centres of female empowerment, providing education and economic opportunity to women barred from secular life. A mainstream fact, by the 15th century, some of the largest convents managed estates spanning hundreds of acres, directly employing serfs and trading goods in local markets. You settle into your seat, the benches curve fitting your body like a cradle, and feel the weight of that legacy pressing on your shoulders. Yet other historians maintain that nunneries simply replicated patriarchal structures in miniature, reinforcing social hierarchies under a holy veneer. They point to evidence of internal power struggles, abbesses exercising authority over feudal tenants and apprentices, suggesting convents wielded secular power as ruthlessly as any baron. You trace the grain of the wood with your fingertips, recalling yesterday's council meeting where you mediated a vinegar versus wine dispute. The same tensions, historians argue, bubbled beneath many convent doors. 2. Your candle guttering. You study the vellum scroll pinned to the wall, a translated excerpt from a recent monograph questioning to what extent nuns shaped theological discourse. Some scholars cite letters from nun poets like Herod of Landsberg, whose Hortus Deliciarum blended botany, theology, and art. Quirky as it seems, a few convents even produced astronomical charts, unusual for women's houses, sparking debates about nuns' roles in early scientific inquiry. Historians still argue whether such intellectual feats were widespread or exceptional relics of rare genius. You sip a small draught of barley water from a pewter cup you keep tucked beneath your gown. The liquid tastes of damp grain and moss, but its coolness clears your mind. You recall the prioress's remark during Vespers. Our sisters' prayers echo in heaven, but their labour echoes in the world below. Those echoing labours, managing infirmaries, copying manuscripts, running dairies, form the backbone of one side of the debate. Did nunneries act as proto-universities for women, or did they merely reinforce conventual seclusion? You lean forward, ready to weigh in, across the circle. Sister Beatrice, the convent's resident chronicler, stands. She unfurls her scrolls and presents a case. Nunneries provided safe havens for widows, orphans, and young women escaping arranged marriages, offering refuge and autonomy otherwise unavailable in medieval society. She cites convent charters that guarantee property rights and dowry returns, a mainstream detail that underscores the legal protections afforded to nuns. Without these walls, she intones, many voices would have faded into obscurity. As she mentions voices, your own fingers twitch instinctively, remembering the strict vow of silence that still governs your daily life. You stifle a grin, thinking of that time you almost whispered a joke about Sister Agatha's silent rod. Board of Silence beats were allegedly imported from medieval schoolrooms, another quirky overlap that hints at broader educational import. The rod's hollow angels seemed comical, yet they symbolised the harsh control critics say convents exercised over women's speech. Sister Beatrice steps down, and Sister Margaret, your old manuscript partner, rises in reply. She holds a thick codex bound in calfskin and decorated with iron clasps. My research, she begins, shows nuns were not only consumers but also producers of knowledge. Our illuminated manuscripts spread beyond cloister walls to royal courts and universities. She gestures to one of her own copies, its margin annotated in a mix of Latin and vernacular. "Look here," she says, pointing with her stylus to a tiny sketch of a water wheel in the margin. "A nun documented her community's water-powered mill, proof we observed and chronicled technological innovation." As Sister Margaret speaks, you recall your own quill's scrape across parchment, copying gospel texts by candlelight. You tap your stylus against the bench thoughtfully. The scriptorium's hush, some argue, nurtured deep scholarship. Others counter that it merely prolonged redundancy, copying the same texts over and over. Historians still argue whether convent libraries functioned as repositories of original thought or as archives preserving earlier works. You note the ambiguous standoff, two visions that each contain elements of truth. Next, Sister Anne, the infirmarian's younger sister, brings in epidemiological insights. She brandishes a parchment chart tracking outbreaks of pestilent fevers among villagers and compares them to convent admission records. Nuns often administered herbal remedies to plague victims, she asserts, and their order's isolation protocols sometimes contained epidemics. A fringe tidbit. Certain houses banned novices from re-entering the nunnery if they visited plague hospitals, a practice some scholars label early quarantine. Historians still debate whether such measures were effective or merely superstitious gestures. You admire her data-driven approach, though you wonder how often convents truly impose such strict separations. The candle flame sputters, casting dancing shadows as Sister Anne seats herself. Silence stretches, pregnant with potential. You stand, your habit's wool creaking softly as you move. The floor cools your feet. You welcome the contrast to the fire of debate. "Esteemed sisters," you begin, your voice calm and measured, "we must consider that nunneries embodied paradox. They offered spaces of female agency within the bounds of obedience, serving as both crucibles of learning and instruments of social regulation." You pause, letting the weight of your words settle. To dismiss convents as mere tools of patriarchy ignores their role in preserving knowledge and providing sanctuary. To glorify them as early feminist havens risks glossing over internal hierarchies and economic entanglements. Historians still argue whether we should view nunneries predominantly as centres of empowerment or repression. Yet, perhaps the truest understanding lies somewhere in between. A ripple of nods circles the room. You gesture toward the citadel of texts behind you. Our archives prove we were innovators, be it penning medical recipes or charting celestial movements. Yet our rule also bound us to silence, poverty, and passive obedience. The very restrictions that afforded us discipline also constrained our voices. At that, Sister Cecilia, who rarely speaks outside the infirmary, stands. She holds an earthenware jar of hyssop oil used in both ritual and remedy. "Our debates are vital," she says softly. "They reflect the living reality of our community. Just as hyssop can cleanse, our discourse should purify understanding." Historians still argue whether convents shaped medieval society or simply mirrored it, but our lived experience is neither monolith nor myth. You feel a thrill at that invocation of lived experience, the real pulse beneath parchments and charters. You recall the convent's bustling infirmary, the hushed aisles of the scriptorium, the guided walks on the cloister's ledge. Each moment wove together the tapestry of your life here, an existence at once confined and capacious. As dawn's first pink light seeps into the chapter house window, you sense the debate's close. No definitive conclusion emerges, nor could it. Instead, the sisters bow and share a brief prayer, sealing their discourse in communal reflection. You extinguish your candle, its ember glowing once before fading. much like the flicker of certainty in this scholarly maze. You step out into the growing day, the echo of debate still ringing in your mind. Outside the chapter house, the cloister bustles with life, the novice mistress calling out lesson times, the infirmarian leading a frail sister to the garden. You take a deep breath of morning air, tasting dew and rosemary. The scholarly debates you've witnessed fade into the rhythm of convent life. Prayer, labour, silence, and the occasional whispered jest in your heart. You trudge onward, ready to weave these complex truths into your own journey, a nun shaped by contradictions, bound by vows, yet ever curious. As you join your sisters in morning prayer, you carry the echoes of that debate within you, trusting that the questions it raised will guide future generations to examine convent life not as a single story, but as a tapestry woven from myriad threads. You awake to the distant toll of the convent bell, its steady rhythm urging you from your straw pallet toward another day of discipline. Today's focus: punishment practices designed to correct errant sisters and preserve communal harmony. You pull on your wool habit, feeling its familiar weight, and trudge through silent corridors to the chapter house, now repurposed for disciplinary proceedings. A line of sisters stands before the abbess's bench, each awaiting judgment for minor infractions: a scratched vellum page, a whispered giggle behind the board of silence, a cracked pilgrim's token left unreported. You recall that medieval convents had codified penances, mainstream fact, from the rule of St. Benedict, which prescribed acts of humility and labour for various transgressions. Yet local customs varied wildly, and historians still argue whether these punishments upheld discipline or fostered resentment. The first sister kneels, accused of spilling ink across a communal manuscript. The abbess pronounces her penance. She must spend 2 hours at the scriptorium's draft table, copying every page of the General Confessor's Manual in reverse script, a quirky task meant to induce both humility and mental focus. As the sister bows her head, you notice the weight of shame pressing her shoulders into the habit's wool. Next, an older sister stands accused of laughing during compline, an offence bound to the sacred vow of silence. Her penance: walking the cloister 6 times at sunrise, carrying a lit beeswax candle without letting the flame flicker, a metaphor for steady piety. You watch her grip the candle, its wick trembling in the chill dawn air. Scholars still debate whether such public displays of penance were spiritual atonement or communal shaming. A younger novice approaches, eyes downcast. She confessed to stealing a pinch of pilgrim bread from the storeroom. The abbess instructs her to kneel on a bed of pebbles for an hour, an uncomfortable posture intended to turn physical discomfort into contrition. You wince at the thought, remembering similar drills in youth aimed at building fitness, albeit with less literal pain. The novice's quiet tears stain her habit, and you catch yourself swallowing a lump of empathy. As each penance is meted out, you note the spectrum of disciplinary measures, from extra prayer vigils to manual labours, digging latrines or hauling peat for winter fires. Penance is our path to perfection, the abbess intones, echoing centuries of monastic teaching. Yet you wonder whether perpetual punishment risks hardening hearts rather than softening them. After the session, you escort the punished sisters to their assignments. The ink spiller hunches at the scriptorium desk, quill in hand, while the candle-bearer begins her solemn walk across the dew-damp hilts of the cloister. You offer silent encouragement, reminding yourself that compassion must temper correction. In mid-morning, you convene with the novice mistress to discuss modifications to the disciplinary code. You propose introducing restoration penances, acts of service to the community that rebuild trust, such as tending the infirmary or teaching a skill rather than solely inflicting physical discomfort. The novice mistress nods thoughtfully. A sister's heart may mend with purpose, not just pain, she whispers. Historians still argue whether medieval monastic codes allowed for restorative justice, but your suggestion plants a seed of evolving practice. Later, You observe the pebbled, kneeling novice in the garden, her form rigid yet resolute. You bring her a small linen cushion, not to soften her penance, but to remind her that charity and discipline can coexist. She glances up, surprise softening her tear-streaked face. You offer a brief nod before walking away, trusting the gesture to carry your intent. By Vespers, the sisters have returned to their stalls, the hum of whispered psalms weaving through the chapel. You note how the punished sisters chime in with particular solemnity, their voices carrying an extra weight of sincerity. The ink spiller's harmonies are especially precise, perhaps driven by the mental acuity honed through reverse script penance. That evening, you join the abbess for a private review of the day's outcomes. She holds your gaze, her eyes reflecting both authority and pastoral care. Our punishments must heal, not only chastise, you say softly. She inclines her head in agreement, the first sign in days of adaptive empathy. Back in your cell, you journal today's reflections on the margin of your wax tablet. Mercy guided by wisdom tempers the sting of penance. You dip the stylus in crushed rose petals, a quirky homage to healing, and trace your words. You pause, letting their meaning settle into your heart. Lying down, you consider the day's lessons, that discipline and compassion need not be at odds, that even the harshest penance can yield growth when tempered by charity. The convent's rules, you realise, are living things, shaped by humanity's capacity for both correction and forgiveness. As sleep claims you, you drift into dreams where pebbles transform into petals, and penance blossoms into grace. You surrender to the deep hush of Compline and settle into your straw pallet as the flicker of one last candle dances across the rough plaster walls. Your breathing slows, each inhale and exhale a soft chant in itself. Tonight you seek something beyond the waking world, a glimpse of the divine in visions cultivated by centuries of sisters before you. From Hildegard of Bingen's illuminated visions in the 12th century to tucked-away accounts of humble novices glimpsing angels, mystical experiences have threaded through convent life, blurring the line between the earthly and the heavenly. Historians still argue whether these visions were genuine encounters with the divine or psychosomatic echoes of intense devotion, but you cannot ignore the pull of the unknown stirring in your heart. You sit upright on your pallet, the scratch of your habit against the straw, a grounding reminder of the physical realm. In front of you, a small wooden icon of the Virgin Mary rests on a ledge, her carved eyes gazing outward with serene expectation. You take a handful of dried mugwort, an herb medieval herbalists recommended to sharpen spiritual perception, and burn it in a clay brazier borrowed from the infirmary. The smoke curls upward, carrying a sweet, resinous scent that settles in your chest like a whispered promise. A fringe tidbit you once overheard in the infirmary suggests that some sisters slipped tiny bits of mugwort into their prayer beads to induce prophetic dreams, though church authorities frowned upon such experimental devotions. In the flickering glow, you begin a simple litany, short phrases of praise and petition, repeated so softly they echo only in your mind. Sancta Maria. Ora pro me, you murmur internally, drawing each word out until it becomes an intonation rather than a sentence. Your heart beats in time with your silent mantra. Outside, the wind tugs at the latticed window, carrying the distant hum of nocturnal life, an ass lowing in a stable, the stray bark of a dog. These earthly sounds tether you as the mugwort smoke swirls, forming hazy patterns that seem to shimmer with significance. Slowly, your lids grow heavy. You let your gaze soften beyond the icon, focusing on the shadows dancing across the wall. Shapes twist into forms, robed figures moving in procession, halos of pale light pulsing around ghostly heads. You press your fingertips to your temples, gently massaging away the tension of the day. The convent's silence deepens. Even the snore of the scullery maid has faded. In this emptiness, your senses sharpen to the flicker of flame and the whisper of breath. As you sink into a liminal state between wakefulness and sleep, you recall the official stance on visions. The Church affirmed only those validated by ecclesiastical authority, like Joan of Arc's visions judged genuine by papal commission. Other experiences were dismissed as mere delusion or demonic trickery. You wonder which verdict your own inner landscape might face. Images drift through your mind. First, a vast cathedral with impossibly tall pillars, their arches soaring like wings. Candles float at eye level, illuminating carved angels whose outstretched hands beckon you forward. You walk among them, the floor polished to mirror the heavens above, and feel your habit's heavy wool dissolve into lightness. A choir sings without sound, harmonies resonating directly in your chest. You continue your litany, letting each ora pro me drop like a pebble into still water. The ripples of thought echo outward, carrying visions vivid as sunlight. A golden stairway descends from an unseen cloud, and you sense a presence, neither male nor female, standing at its base. The presence's voice is not heard but known, filling you with a profound calm. You do not dare speak. Your lips move only in silent awe. Abruptly, the vision shifts. You stand in the cloister garden at dawn, petals glistening with dew despite the hour. A single rose blooms at your feet, its petals unfolding in reverse, closing rather than opening, until it becomes a bud again. You reach down, and the rose's stem yields, allowing you to cradle it in your hand. At its centre, instead of thorns, you see a small heart carved into the flesh of the blossom. The sight fills you with warmth, as though the rose has borrowed its glow from your own beating heart. Yet doubt flickers like a shadow at the edge of the vision. Did the rose truly bloom backwards, or did your mind bend nature to your longing? Historians still debate whether mystical experiences in nunneries were spontaneous acts of grace, or the byproduct of intense regimen and isolation. You steel yourself, reminding your rational mind that such debates cannot touch the truth of what you feel now, an intimate communion beyond doctrine. The vision fades and reforms into a dim chapel, where all the candles have been extinguished. You stand bathed in darkness so complete it seems to possess weight. Then, from an unseen altar, a single candle ignites itself, its flame quivering in anticipation. You lift your hand, and the flame responds, growing larger until it fills the entire space with a gentle glow. In that light, you glimpse dozens of sisters kneeling in concentric circles, some cloaked in familiar habits, others draped in robes you've never seen. Their bowed heads remain still, yet you know they are united in silent prayer. A whispered hush rises from the gathering, but no sound escapes their lips. Instead, the hush itself enfolds you, and you realize that this is the collective breath of devotion, an echo of every prayer ever uttered in this stone sanctuary. You close your eyes, letting the hush become a physical sensation, a soft tide that carries you towards the vision's final note, a solitary, radiant figure stepping forward. You open your eyes to see the Virgin's icon before you once more, but now her carved eyes glimmer with life, reflecting your own. Your pulse quickens, and the vision trembles on the brink of unravelling. You press your palms to the cold stone floor, grounding yourself, willing your spirit to remain tethered to your body. The golden stairway, the rose, the living icon, all dissolve into the murk of memory as the mugwort smoke fades and your silent litany slows to a stop. You blink and find yourself back on your straw pallet. The brazier's embers have cooled to ash, and the icon sits unchanged in the flickering lamplight. Your breathing returns to its normal rhythm, muscles unclenching after the vision's weight. The convent's walls surround you, silent and steady, as though they, too, have watched your mystical journey. Before sleep overtakes you, you whisper a soft prayer of thanks, whether for divine encounter or for the solace found within your own mind. You tuck the small rose petal you pressed earlier into the palm of your hand, a tangible memento of the reverie. Tomorrow, you'll resume the rhythms of chanting psalms and scrubbing floors and tending gardens and guiding novices. Yet tonight, you carry the memory of the staircase, the rose's carved heart, and the hush of 1,000 sisters' prayers. Eyes closed, you surrender to sleep's embrace, the last flicker of lamplight forming a halo around your dream-bound head. Whether your visions were celestial truths or the sanctuary of your inner soul, they have summoned a deeper faith, one not bound by rule or record, but etched into the very fabric of your being. You stand in the chapel's nave as dawn's first pale light filters through the stained glass windows, each hue falling like a prayer across the flagstones. Today marks the culmination of your journey through convent life, and you feel the weight of centuries settled like dust in these stones. The bizarre rules you've lived, silence and speech, fasting and feasting, labour and learning have echoed across generations, shaping not only your own story, but the legacy of countless women who walked these hidden halls before you. You trace the carved saints on the choir stalls with your fingertips, and wonder how their silent authority still guides your every breath. You recall the convent's founding charter, dated nearly 800 years ago, when a noble widow bequeathed land and wealth to an abbess whose name now lies erased by time. That charter bound nuns to vows of poverty and obedience, but it also recognised their right to manage estates and dispense alms. Historians still argue whether these clauses liberated women from feudal constraints or simply entrenched new hierarchies under sacred sanction. Yet, here you stand, evidence both of autonomy and of submission woven into the very mortar beneath your feet. The echo of perpetual silence, the rule that shaped your second breath, lingers in the hush of the cloister. In your mind, you replay the moments when you craved a single word, and then, later, savoured the abbess's rare word of kindness. That strange interplay of speech and stillness finds resonance today in modern tales of activism and women's voices breaking silence. You smile, realising that the convent strictures, paradoxically, taught you both restraint and resilience. You move toward the scriptorium's alcove, where one of your finest manuscripts rests under a pane of glass. Its pages, illuminated with lapis and gold leaf, carry the gospel text you copied by candlelight. You gently press your palm to the case, feeling the faint tremor of faith that went into each stroke. Those pages have travelled to royal libraries and university archives, a tangible testament to the nun's craft. Quirky stories endure of scribal sisters hiding marginalia, tiny sketches of everyday life, reminding future readers that even convent walls could not silence curiosity. In the infirmary corridor, you pause by the shelf of tinctures and salves, the distilled wisdom of herbal medicine passed down from sister to sister. Comfrey for broken bones, yarrow for fevers, mugwort for dreams, each remedy is a living echo of medieval pharmacopoeias. Modern herbalists still debate the efficacy of these treatments, yet pharmaceutical laboratories trace their roots back to the same gardens you once tended. You whisper a silent blessing to those who came before you, whose hands mixed honey and herb under flickering torches. Outside, the cloister garden lies empty, dew beading on the lavender and mint. You step among the rows of plants you once pruned and pause at the rose arch. Its blooms, cultivated for centuries, nod in the morning breeze. You remember weaving wreaths for feast days and gifting sprigs of rosemary to pilgrims. That simple ritual, shared beauty born of communal labour, finds echoes today in charitable orders and community gardens that trace their origins to monastic horticulture. You enter the chapter house one final time. The circular benches worn smooth by the knees of sisters who deliberated, debated, and decided countless matters here. You touch the polished stone seat you once occupied during the great scholarly debate on nunnery's societal roles. The arguments you heard, whether convents empowered women or merely confined them, continue to reverberate in academic journals and spirited conferences, Yet amid those lofty disputes, you recognise a deeper truth, that the lived experience of convent life cannot be distilled into a single thesis. In the refectory, you sit at the long table one last time, the scent of barley and herbs lingering in the air. The meal served today is simple: coarse rye bread and a small bowl of pottage, seasoned with the garden's final parsley of the season. You break the bread, mindful of every crumb, and taste it slowly, honouring the legacy of communal sustenance that sustained you through years of fasting and feasting alike. As you rise, you feel the strap of your wooden rosary against your hip, a humble token of your vows. You finger each bead, recalling the rhythm of prayer that carried you through darkness and doubt. Those beads, fashioned by novices centuries ago, link you by touch to every sister who knelt before you, each one whispering Hail Mary in the depths of night. The tradition persists. In faraway retreats and whispered devotions, women still use rosaries to find solace and strength. You approach the abbess, now aged with silver threads reflecting the candlelight. She places her hand on your shoulder, a silent benediction that speaks volumes. You bow your head, understanding that this moment bridges past and future. The abbess's gaze, steady and kind, reminds you that the convent's rules, bizarre as they may seem, have crafted a tapestry of faith, learning, and service that shaped not only individual lives, but entire communities. Stepping into the cloister's open courtyard, you feel the sun's warmth on your face. The gate stands before you, its iron bars gleaming with promise of a world beyond. Yet you carry the convent within you, its stillness, its rituals, its radical mix of renunciation and empowerment. You lift one foot and step through the threshold, heart steady with purpose and memory. Behind you, the abbey walls rise, silent sentinels of a women's story often overlooked. Ahead, the path stretches toward unknown horizons, guided by the strange, beautiful rules that shaped you. Each echo of convent life, silence, speech, labour, devotion resounds in every step you take. And you know that as long as hearts seek solace in ritual, as long as hands labour to preserve knowledge, the legacy of these hidden sisters will continue, carried forward by each change and each choice you make. The day's light drifts away as you settle beneath a canopy of stars, each one a distant lantern guiding you toward gentler dreams. You lie on soft grass in memory, though your body rests on a straw pallet, and feel the earth's calm pulse beneath you. Every breath you draw is slow and even, carrying whispers of lavender and mint from the cloister garden you once tended. Let the cool night air wrap around you like a soft blanket, carrying away any lingering tension in your shoulders and knees. Remember the soft echo of your sister's footsteps along stone corridors, the hush of prayer hours, and the gentle flicker of candle flames. These memories are strands of comfort woven into your heart, reminding you that ritual and silence hold power to soothe a racing mind. Allow each star to reflect a moment of peace, the shared laughter at a hidden joke, the secret taste of honeyed bread, the hush of confession conferring relief. As you drift deeper, let the murmured cadence of Ora Pro Me become your lullaby. Feel the weight of your woolen habit transform into the warmth of communal care, wrapping you in the embrace of generations of devoted hearts. No longer confined by walls, you roam freely in dreamscapes of rose arches, moonlit orchards, and candlelit scriptoriums where gold leaf gleams like promise. In this gentle twilight, every rule you kept becomes a stepping stone to serenity, every vow a quiet testament to purpose. Your pulse is slow to the heartbeat of ancient stones, and your thoughts soften into whispers. Trust that the legacy of your journey, a tapestry of discipline, devotion, and discovery, will guide you even in sleep's quiet realm. So, rest now, beloved soul. Let the night's hush cradle you as softly as the convent's sacred silence once did. Tomorrow's dawn will bring new steps, but for now, surrender to dreams woven with the echoes of centuries, and drift wherever love and faith may lead.